All right, if the Bears can't figure it out with Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson, and the literal Pope, I'm thinking this team is just never going to be good. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 16 team in my 2025 NFL Power Rankings, and welcome into the top half of this deep dive series today. We'll be talking about the Chicago Bears, and as the saying goes, with big powers come big responsibilities, and they get the lucky spider bite and wake up with superpowers, so to speak, with the Panthers gifting them the number one pick and getting Caleb Williams, who for 2 years we were wondering who was going to be lucky enough to draft him with what we thought he was as a prospect. And in turn, they get Ben Johnson, who for 2 years we were wondering who is going to get lucky enough to land Ben Johnson as their head coach. Those two powers united here in Chicago here. Lots of expectations for this team to figure it out. Lots to talk about here today, not just with those two core pieces, but with the rest of this team, and if they can finally meet their lofty expectations. As we get started, if you could take just a second to hit that like button, it's a free and easy way to support this deep dive series. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our remaining deep dives as we lead up to the number one team in my power rankings. And lastly, do not go anywhere. The wonderful Snyder of the Bootleg Football Podcast, as well as his Bears podcast, the Bear Era Podcast, joins the show for another year here. Had a great talk with EJ. You're not going to want to miss that. But let's begin the show here discussing this new look coaching staff as we build this offseason changes graphic throughout the video here. For the coaching staff, I do say upgraded this offseason. You move on from Matt Eberflus, a failed tenure as the head coach here, along with the various offensive minds that went through the building here, Luke Getsy and Thomas Brown, who became the interim head coach for a little bit, along with their de facto defensive coordinator in Eric Washington. But the additions, they land, as we mentioned, Ben Johnson, the prized commodity among NFL circles. And not just that, in my opinion, a brilliant defensive coordinator hire in Dennis Allen, who was recently let go as the head coach in New Orleans. And then Declan Doyle is going to come over from Denver, a part of this Sean Payton-based coaching staff to be the offensive coordinator here. But as we begin the coaching breakdown here at the helm with Ben Johnson, obviously just the highest of expectations for a rookie head coach with everything that he accomplished with those Lions. At worst was one of the three best designed offenses in the league. They had offensive balance, they could run the ball, they could throw the ball, the creativity, not just with all the trick plays that he likes to bring to the table, but pre-snap motion and finding different ways to get different playmakers involved, whether it's Jamison Williams, getting jet sweeps, or Amon-Ra St. Brown lining up as a running back in the backfield. So much creativity, innovation, and production with that offense. And coming out of that system, where he could have flown off the board as a head coach candidate last year, he goes back. They don't get the job done, but again, highly sought after, if not more sought after yet another year of high-end offensive production last year. Ben Johnson heads to the Bears here, I would say, as one of the most sought after head coach candidates of the last decade. Really, the only two guys I can think of in the same conversation would be Kyle Shanahan coming out of Atlanta when they went to the Super Bowl, and then maybe Brian Daboll coming out of Buffalo. But I think Ben Johnson's expectations are even higher than what Daboll's were. But this does remind me of when Daboll got hired, where I am buying the hype. I did have Daboll as a rookie head coach ranked inside the top half of head coaches already before he ever officially logged a game as a head coach in the NFL. Likewise here with Ben Johnson. I rank him as the 13th best head coach here as we head into 2025, and definitely room to go up for sure, right? And yeah, Brian Daboll has had his struggles in recent seasons, but at least in that first year with the Giants, they did surprise everybody and make the playoffs, and Dable did rightfully win the Coach of the Year award. So I think Bears fans, at least in year one, would accept those types of results from Ben Johnson. But it's going to come with high rankings for the offensive coach grades that I give these teams as well. They have the 9th ranking for pass game design, 8th to 11th for run game design. Again, that balance is very much in place with Ben Johnson there. That said, C grade for the overall coach and culture, that sort of benefit of the doubt slider that we give these teams. That's much more of a Bears ranking there, 23rd to 25th. That is something that Ben Johnson, along with the offensive scheming, is going to have to come in and get to work with, building up that winning culture, team chemistry, all that sort of stuff. And hopefully, having been under Dan Campbell all these years, he's learned a thing or two about running a building and relating to players and inspiring some of that kneecap biting mentality. Obviously, Ben Johnson's going to have to do things his own way. He is not Dan Campbell. Nobody is. He is one of a kind. So he's going to have to find his own leadership qualities and approach and get this team back to winning football, which it's been a while. But needless to say, I'm very excited about this hire for the Chicago Bears, and I'm very optimistic that he can get this thing going in the right direction. He does bring in Declan Doyle as well as the offensive coordinator, who was working with Sean Payton in New Orleans and then followed him over to Denver. Seems like a good guy to go after. I'm not terribly familiar with Declan Doyle, but surely we will learn more about him here throughout the years in Chicago. And if things do go well here, I would think Declan Doyle, learning from Sean Payton for 5 years and now Ben Johnson, that's going to make him a pretty sought-after candidate in a couple years, again, if things do go well. So I like that as an approach. Before we talk about the defensive side of things, I do want to talk about the scheme a little bit more here. Ben Johnson really does run it all. I would describe his offense as kind of a modern, multiple pro-style offense. They are an offense that, especially by today's NFL standards, does actually like to get under center. They have an under center based run game for the most part, but they will throw the entire kitchen sink at you. Wide zone, counter, pin and pull, duo, getting, jet sweeps going and tosses. Like, the entire spectrum of running plays are on the table for them. And then Ben Johnson's going to use the threat of that multiple run game and piggyback off of it into a fully diverse play action repertoire as well. They lean into 12 personnel a ton. They were third in the entire NFL in Detroit last year in terms of running 12 personnel, hence why they went and got a second tight end with the 10th overall pick in the draft in Colston Loveland. So you're going to see a lot of those heavier packages where you have to deal with the run and an explosive passing game out of those heavy formations. So that's really the core of what they do. But Ben Johnson's also a really good just drop back passing game designer as well. He's excellent at creating those high lows where he's putting the linebackers in a bind where they either have to defend a dig or a hitch route at the kind of intermediate to deep level, but then also having the threat of a shorter target underneath, running a crossing route or a stick route, and kind of having that two-man game that he had in Detroit between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, where either of those guys could be running those types of routes, and teaching the quarterback, okay, obviously if the linebacker's going to collapse down or not get enough depth, hit that 15-yard dig route and we'll get the first down. That's great. We saw Jared Goff throw that ball as efficiently as anybody over the last few years. But teaching the quarterback, it's okay if the linebackers do take that throw away, or even if the safeties are going to collapse down on that, where he also has usually a third level to hit a post behind those safeties if you want to get really advanced with it. But teaching the quarterback, hey, if they take away the dig route, it's fine to throw the ball underneath. We're going to have a good run after catch threat, and we're going to get 8 or 9 yards. And if we end up in 4th and 1, no problem. We'll go for it. And that's where a great run game design comes in handy, and Ben Johnson's trick plays come in handy. Those 4th and 1s can lead to just like crazy explosive plays with, I think you guys have all seen all of the different stuff that Ben Johnson will break out with double passes and God knows what in his big bag of tricks. But when you're in those 4th and 1 situations, that's probably the best time to get into your trick plays because the defense is more worried about you just getting that 1 yard and they're going to load up the box. That's when you can really burn them deep. So it just all comes together here with Ben Johnson and the hype is real. Let's now see him go out, take it out of Detroit and plant it in the division here with the Chicago Bears. But honestly, what gets really crazy here with the Bears and how they find themselves in the top half of these power rankings is it's not just the Ben Johnson factor. They paired it with Dennis Allen. And I was saying this in September, like predicting this to be the outcome here where the Bears land Ben Johnson, then Dennis Allen with all of these really New Orleans connections. Ben Johnson never worked with Sean Payton, but you figured through word of mouth, Dan Campbell was a big Sean Payton guy. Dennis Allen would come highly recommended from Sean Payton. And then Declan Doyle, obviously, as well, another kind of Sean Payton connection here. But I think very highly of Dennis Allen as a defensive coordinator. And those that have watched this deep dive series throughout the years know that I've consistently praised him for how well that Saints defense has played, despite the fact that, hey, they haven't really had much of a pass rush or a defensive line. And Bears fans will like to hear that because the defensive line is not really the strength of this football team either. But obviously, Allen has had his shortcomings as a head coach in New Orleans. They haven't been able to get over the hump. But it's not like they've been a train wreck either. And when they've won, it's mostly been because of the defense. But I just love this setup so much because clearly nobody is going to be seeking Dennis Allen to be a head coach again. In fact, this was his second opportunity as a head coach. We forget about his very short Raiders tenure as a head coach from 2012 to 2014. But this is that Kansas City Chiefs formula with the Steve Spagnuolo setup, a guy that isn't going anywhere, that's going to be able to build up sustainable chemistry with his own players, with the scouting department, so that they know exactly what traits to look for, what types of players he likes for his defense, the chemistry to just have that happy marriage with the head coach and offensive coach in Ben Johnson. This is just a dream setup for the Bears, for Bears fans, and for Dennis Allen. Such a brilliant hire, in my opinion. And I do think you are going to get very good coaching on the defensive side of the ball, on par with what Matt Eberflus was bringing to the table. And I know Bears fans don't want to hear that because they hate Matt Eberflus, but the reality is this Bears defense did overachieve with an abysmal defensive line. They were still a very respectable defense in the Matt Eberflus era. Now, I'll talk about Allen's scheme in a second. I think there's a higher upside with Dennis Allen's scheme because it can be more aggressive and intimidating of a defense, and I do prefer his style of defense to what Eberflus did, so that's even better. But the fact that you're going from a defensive head coach to now an offensive head coach, and at the very worst, you're not going to get a drop-off in the level of defensive coaching is a big deal. So I do have the Bears ranked as high as 7th for pass defense coaching, 7th to 12th. And then for run defense coaching, I have them 15th to 22nd, a little bit lower there, but still very good with a B grade there for the run defense coaching and a B plus grade for the pass defense coaching, with frankly room for those to get into the top 5 as Dennis Allen kind of reestablishes himself here in Chicago. It usually does take a little bit of time when you're going from one place to another to just immediately resume top 5 level coaching, if you will. But as far as Dennis Allen's scheme is concerned, like I said, it's a little more aggressive. I think it brings a higher upside to the table than Matt Eberflus's kind of rush with 4, win with zone coverage style that had a very high floor. But Allen loves to blitz. He loves to run man coverage. He's going to get in your face and press you and run stunts and throw his linebackers at you and force you to block them in pass protection. He puts a lot of heavy bodies at the line of scrimmage and stops the run on early downs with those heavy bodies and the blitzes. It's just a classic aggressive bump and run defense, very similar to what we see in Detroit with other Saints, Dennis Allen kind of disciples in Aaron Glenn, among others. But they did it more out of a 3-4 based front. This will be more of a 4-2 based front. That's kind of the core difference there, but it is very much that attacking press man mentality. But beyond the macro scale of what this scheme looks like, there is one thing that Dennis Allen's defense has always done that I respect, and this was something that worked really well against Tom Brady even, is I think Dennis Allen has an excellent feel for knowing where the opposing offense's hot reads are. I think he spends a lot of time watching film of his opponent that week, how they handled the blitz, and he's very good at throwing the blitz at you, knowing how you're going to respond to it, and then taking I would describe it as a lurking zone defender, whether it's a hot drop zone from your defensive line with an edge rusher dropping or a mugged up linebacker that's showing blitz that's going to drop into this space, or even a safety flying into that space from a pre-snap deep safety alignment. But Dennis Allen is really good at basically baiting you, blitzing you one way, knowing how you're going to attack it, whether it's a quick throw to the flat, a backside slant, the tight end leaking out, whatever it is. He's really good at anticipating it, dropping a defender into that space, and forcing mistakes from the quarterback off those blitzes. So it's a more of a minor thing that he does that does add up and becomes very effective. So I'm just a huge fan of Dennis Allen's system. He's had really, honestly, a lot of success in New Orleans. I know it's dropped off in recent years in New Orleans. Sadly, those have become some of the least talented defenses in the entire NFL. But even then, I would say those defenses have overachieved thanks to Dennis Allen, and his time wore off as a head coach. I'm not saying the Saints made a mistake firing him or anything like that. It is one of those cases where it's a shame that in the NFL you can't just demote your head coach, because ideally the Saints would be much better off with Dennis Allen staying as their defensive coordinator instead of going to Brandon Staley, who is the worst defensive coordinator in the league. I think we'll continue our streak of dissing Brandon Staley in these deep dives here, at least keep that going one more video. But yeah, just I think this staff is remarkable, and they've got to prove that this group can come together and work out. But I see the potential for this to be, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or oversell this, but this has potential, I would say, by the end of like 2026, because it does take time for staffs to get everything going, for this to be in the top 3 of best coached organizations in the entire league. And it's sustainable, because I don't think Dennis Allen's going to go anywhere. So I'm just really excited to see where this goes for the Bears. But that sets things up in a very fun way to get into this roster breakdown, which begins with the quarterback discussion and Caleb Williams heading into a huge year 2. Caleb, obviously a quarterback that had lofty expectations, kind of the golden boy tag as a quarterback prospect. There's a debate if he was a generational prospect, but surely one of the higher perceived QB prospects of the decade. I think that is at least fair to say. So for the Bears to get him with that number 1 pick that they got from the Panthers was a huge gift. And like I said in the intro, with great powers come great responsibilities. In this case, with a Caleb Williams comes big expectations, and he didn't meet them in his rookie season. And it became even worse when you see other rookie quarterbacks in his class, Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, outplay him to the degree that they did. So I think that does raise the stakes for year 2 on Caleb Williams. And unfortunately, it has, I think, led to probably some unfair scrutiny of Caleb Williams. If you log on to Twitter or see the way a lot of fans react to how Caleb played in his first season, people are already trying to write him off as a bust. And look, I get it. He had his struggles. I'm going to talk about some of those struggles. But by rookie quarterbacks' standards, Compare this to the rookie years of Jared Goff or Bryce Young or Trevor Lawrence, and Caleb Williams looks like freaking Aaron Rodgers compared to those guys. Like, Caleb still did a lot of good stuff in his rookie season. He had, I would say, 4 or 5 like really good games. I think he was okay in the majority of his games, and then he had probably 4 or 5 stinkers in there. That still was good enough for one of the best Bears quarterback seasons ever. 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Finishes with 24 big-time throws to 19 turnover-worthy plays. Again, there was still a lot of good. And when you watch Caleb Williams, the high-end stuff speaks for itself. The traits he has are absurd. They are on that Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers plane of existence. I don't want to quite go to like Josh Allen, because I'm on the record saying Josh Allen is the most physically gifted quarterback to ever play in the NFL. I think Anthony Richardson challenged that. But whatever a smidge down from that is, Caleb is in there. He's got ridiculous arm talent. He has what I like to call a C-ball, hit ball arm, where he can put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants, obviously from a clean pocket, making throws way down the field, 60, 65 yards out there, but even more so off-platform throws, leaning back in the pocket, throwing on the run. He has it all in his bag, and he has really underrated athletic ability. Not that people don't praise his athleticism, but I don't think he gets enough credit for being up there with some of the most elusive, hard-to-sack quarterbacks in the league. And when he does get on the run, he has like legitimate contact balance and shiftiness and creativity as a runner. And some of his high-end plays as a scrambler last year, I mean, he in many times like bailed himself out with his ability to scramble. But he definitely created his fair share of explosive plays with his feet. And if you're looking for that Bears quarterback to get you 4,000 passing yards, well, okay, Caleb stopped short of that last year, 3,540 yards. But if you did add the 372 yards as a scrambler on top of that, all right, we're getting closer. We're just under 4,000 yards in the drop back passing game from your quarterback. So that is a big factor here. And before I talk about some of the negatives here, I do just want to say I am generally speaking still a big believer in Caleb Williams, especially getting to pair with Ben Johnson here. He's going to have some guys to throw to that we'll talk about. And I certainly didn't watch his rookie season and say, well, that's it. He's a bust. He's not going to work out. There is still a long runway here for Caleb to reach his potential. Now, I will cater to the Caleb Williams haters a little bit here. And I don't want to overly gas this up and act like nothing was wrong last year and just ignore the negative stuff that I did see on film with Caleb Williams that he just has got to improve upon. And there's 2 specific areas with Caleb Williams that I think really held him back last year that he's just got to get better at. There's no way around it. Number 1 is playing on time with his processing and decision-making within the structure of this offense. And number 2 is he just has to cut down on the number of missed throws that he had. He led the NFL in combined overthrows and underthrows last year, and some of it is raw accuracy, and some of it is timing and chemistry with these wide receivers. And that second issue there with the accuracy issues last year is much more straightforward. And I'm not necessarily worried about it yet, but it was an issue last year, and it was a surprising issue because as someone that watched every single start of Caleb Williams' final season in college, accuracy was not an issue for him in college. It was a defining strength in his game. So to see him show up with all these overthrows and even short-arming some of these throws was really a genuine surprise. So that's going to be up to Caleb and the quarterback coaching and Ben Johnson to figure out if there's something mechanically speaking going on, or if it's just a confidence issue, or whatever the hell those just raw missed throws were, cleaning those up. I think he's more than capable of doing it, considering it was a strength in college, and we've seen so many quarterbacks at this point improve that accuracy attribute, whether it's Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. It can be done, but it must be done. But the other side of it is the chemistry throws and the timing throws, the back shoulders, or sitting down in his zone, reading out zone coverages, being on the same page with his receivers. It was wild week after week after week. He could not get on the same page with his receivers, and it was everybody. It was DJ Moore, it was Keenan Allen, it was Rome Odunze, you name it. And that is a repetition thing, but it is a communication thing. It is in practice when you have those issues, communicating what you saw, listening to what the receiver saw, so that when that happens in a game, you guys are on the same page. So it's those two things together, cutting down on the missed throws, where again, Caleb Williams had 55 combined overthrows and underthrows last year, led the NFL. The next down was another rookie in Bo Nix with 46. Patrick Mahomes actually had 40, but 40 is a lot less than 55. Fun fact, Anthony Richardson had 37 in 11 games. We know his accuracy issues, but he's got to cut those down. There's no way around it. You couldn't watch a Bears game for the most part without realizing that is an issue for him. And then the other big issue is the processing and decision making. Yes, he was a rookie, and a lot of this is just understanding the playbook, knowing his reads better, knowing where to go with the ball better. A lot of it is rookie stuff that you do expect to get better, though it does hurt that guys like Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels were really good in that phase as rookies. And I would say Caleb Williams, for a rookie, was below average in terms of processing and decision making. Not horrible, but below average. So you do expect some general growth there, and hopefully Ben Johnson giving him better first reads and more open first reads will be a huge step towards that. But there was one specific throw that is a huge part of a Ben Johnson offense, as we talked about, that I just have got to see Caleb Williams see and throw with better anticipation, and that is the in-breaking route. Whether it's a crossing route, but more specifically those dig routes, Caleb has got to do a better job understanding that, okay, at first glance, at the top of your receiver's route when he's running a dig, the defensive back might be right on top of that route, but Caleb has got to better understand how that route develops, in that once he cuts inside, the receiver's probably going to create about a half step or a full step of separation. And then if you lead the ball out in front of that receiver with a accurate, well-timed throw, not only is the receiver going to create a little bit more separation than what you're seeing at the top of that route, but he's got the box out angle, right? The defensive back is going to have a very hard time getting around your wide receiver. And when you're talking about DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, last year Cole Kmet, this year Colston Loveland is going to be running this route, I would bet 35% of Loveland's routes will be dig routes. Those are big targets that are going to be able to box out a safety or a slot corner. And as long as you're putting that ball out in front of them, yes, the DB might be within a step, but that is an NFL open throw that is a high percentage look for you, that within this offense has got to be executed more consistently. And Caleb Williams, more often than not on those throws, would not throw it. He would either look elsewhere and attempt a lower percentage throw, or he would take a sack, where he led the NFL in sacks last year. Granted, the offensive line was not perfect, but in many cases, sacks are a quarterback stat, and not throwing those balls with anticipation leads to a lot of those sacks. Or he would get into scramble drill and make something special happen. That's great, but you got to play on time and understand those throws much, much better. So that's one area where I think Ben Johnson is going to drill into him. They're going to rep that time and time again. And I think spending a first-round pick on Colston Loveland is only going to help the idea that, hey, this is a core aspect of what we do. You have got to get better at trusting that throw, Caleb. So that's a big thing that I'm looking for sure in his second season here. So definitely room to grow, to say the least, for Caleb Williams, but I am far from writing him off either. And I think he can get there. And if some of these things come along, we are talking about a game-changing, potentially elite quarterback. I'm not looking at his rookie season and saying that the upside that we discussed with him as a prospect is gone. It's just that rookie season he's probably coming out of that further away from that than we could have hoped for or expected. So heading into his second season, I have Caleb Williams ranked as the 25th overall quarterback, obviously with the up arrow on him there, but 26th in passing. And then it is worth mentioning he and the Bears provide a very nice boost in the designed QB run game, where Caleb does rank inside the top 10 with a B grade for that QB run multiplier that I give these teams. And I'm very excited as well to see what Ben Johnson might have planned, because we know he's a creative play caller, but he did have Jared Goff, who is about as far from a Caleb Williams in terms of mobility and design run game possibilities. That could provide a whole nother wrinkle for Ben Johnson that we just haven't quite seen yet. So I'm excited to see what could be unlocked there as well. Now, as far as the backup quarterback is concerned, there are definitely some fans of Tyson Bagent's game out there, even some people calling for him to get some playing time last year when Caleb went through a couple poor games in a row. But he, to me, is a backup quarterback through and through. And then you do sign Case Keenum. So a veteran quarterback in the building. I wouldn't be surprised if Case Keenum is on this staff before long as a part of the quarterback coaches. But yeah, this season's going to go as Caleb Williams goes. If anything happens to him, I'm not expecting a big Tyson Bagent breakout or a Case Keenum miracle season circa 2019 with the Vikings. But let's go ahead and talk about the weapons and who Caleb Williams will get to throw to here. The Bears have a very good group, though a group that does still have some proving out to do. But they rank damn near top 10 for me. They rank 10th to 13th with a B+ grade and lots of options to throw to here. And as we continue to build out the offseason changes graphic here, forgive me, I glossed over this with the quarterback room because they really didn't do anything other than bringing in Case Keenum as a partial QB coach, essentially. So stayed neutral with QB. But they did shuffle the deck here at wide receiver, losing Keenan Allen, who played a lot last year, 3/4 of their snaps. And then they bring in Luther Burden in the second round, on top of Olamide Zaccheaus coming over from Washington, and Devin Duvernay, who's going to be more of a return specialist for them. Keenan Allen was just okay for them last year. I think Luther Burden and Zaccheaus is pretty close to a push with what Keenan Allen gave them last year. So I said this wide receiver room is neutral, though it does become deeper and younger, certainly. But then at tight end, you spent a top 10 pick on Colston Loveland. You would expect to see this group upgraded, certainly. They are losing Gerald Everett, Mercedes Lewis, who were their heavy personnel guys last year. And then they did bring in Durham Smythe as well as a kind of third tight end blocking specialist. So upgrades at tight end, staying neutral at wide receiver, certainly even added bodies to throw to in this group of weapons. But this is going to begin with DJ Moore, who I do still believe deserves to be discussed as a true number one superstar wide receiver, though last year he did not play up to that status. 2023 with Justin Fields, he certainly did. But it is worth noting that one huge season where DJ Moore was sensational is really the only year where he has been a bona fide number one without any form of criticism about him. And I would say some of the frustrations that we did witness with DJ Moore last year with some of the drops and some of the miscommunications, that isn't completely disfamiliar to Panthers fans that watched some of his earlier years in Carolina. There were some years where it was like, man, this guy can do everything. He's big, he's fast, he's awesome after the catch, he threatens all three levels, he wins tough catches at times. But there's been years where there's been just a little bit something missing, and last year was a year with DJ Moore where I would say, again, there was a little bit something missing with him. And I think even Bears fans would admit that. So I actually kind of talked myself into putting the up and down yellow arrow that I use for this series. I give him an 87 rating. I give him the benefit of the doubt that he is still a number one, quote unquote, superstar wide receiver. Anything north of 86 is where I categorize those players. But the up and down arrow is saying, well, he could get back to 2023 where he was probably closer to like a 90. Whereas last year, he played more like a low 80s type of wide receiver and more of a wide receiver 2 caliber receiver. So kind of a quiet, big year at 28 years old for DJ Moore after he did get the massive contract extension last offseason. They did draft a Luther Burden, who my high-end pro comp on him was DJ Moore. They've got some pieces that could potentially kind of phase him out, slowly but surely here. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if, what we saw last year is who DJ Moore is now, that's not a guy worth $29 million and being the number one target in your offense. So I don't want to keep this overly negative with DJ Moore. I lean more towards the side of Ben Johnson's going to know how to use this guy, that he is one of the 7 or 8 best receivers in the NFL from a talent perspective, and that he can clean up some of the drops and get on a better page with Caleb Williams here in year 2, and that arrow will be more pointing up. But it certainly was not all rainbows and butterflies with DJ Moore last year either, and I think that should at least be mentioned. But for now, he is number 1, and the definition to me of a true number 1, like I said. But then you have your number 2 wide receiver here in Rome Odunze, who gets to be the number 2 wide receiver now that Keenan Allen is gone. That was always interesting to me because Keenan Allen was one of my pro comps on Rome Odunze, being a guy that I don't know that he's ever going to be like, let's just say, what DJ Moore in 2023 was, as that true number 1 alpha with the premium traits to do everything at this position. But Keenan Allen, obviously a lofty pro comp, but someone that is at his best in the short to intermediate game, winning tough catches and getting, a lot of those chemistry throws, back shoulders, sitting down in zones, that kind of tough, crafty possession wide receiver with some inside out slot flexibility as well. So for Keenan Allen to literally be here last year, nice mentor to have, but in terms of Rome being able to win in the areas that he's best at, getting efficient targets in those areas, and then maybe even more so getting to develop a chemistry out the gate with Caleb Williams as these guys came into the league together, that was all, I can't say postponed, but like bottlenecked by Keenan Allen. And now that's just cleared up. And I think his role within this offense is so much more concise now. It's like I can see clearly now the rain is gone, so to speak. So I'm really excited to see Rome in year 2, especially if DJ can get back to 2023 form where he can be the deep threat. He can be the guy that you funnel the offense through. And then Rome is just going to be able to be just a constant thorn in the side of opposing defenses. And I think running those dig routes that are going to be a staple of this offense. And he is really good after the catch. He's got contact balance and shiftiness to get some of these quick touches in this passing game. But also to develop that back shoulder chemistry and all of that with Caleb Williams. There is just so much room to grow now, especially with Keenan Allen gone and in Rome's second season. So while his first season definitely had some disappointing moments, it did. There was some drops that were uncharacteristic for him, an 8.5% drop rate. That was the thing with him at Washington, was like, this dude catches everything. And even just like some of the like moments on the sideline, like not getting a second foot down, like stepping out of bounds, like just not always having that spatial awareness that was so great at Washington. There was some moments of like, that's interesting. I wouldn't expect that from Rome Odunze. I think he can get back to what he did at Washington in a more healthy offensive infrastructure here. And for what it's worth, he did catch 72% of his contested catch targets. So at least that was still there. Like, this dude is still tough as shit. So, some frustrating moments in year 1, but I definitely still have the up arrow on him and think he can have a really nice second season here. Then you have, I think, Colston Loveland should be discussed as the next guy here. And he might even get more targets than either Rome or DJ Moore. I think it's going to be a pretty even split for the most part in terms of volume share here. But
I think in terms of talent and contributions, we should discuss Colston Loveland next in this pecking order. And the Bears obviously think the world of Colston Loveland. They spend the 10th overall pick on him. And you can debate if that was too early for Loveland. You can certainly go back to my draft analysis on him. I had a more of a late first type of guy, but it was a draft class where players 9 through 25 were all pretty tightly knit. So I don't think it was horrible value or anything like that. And obviously they see him as their Sam Laporta. And at least with this pick, I will give Ben Johnson the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I was critical of the Lions for targeting Sam Laporta over some other tight ends in that draft class as well. I mean, obviously they could have taken Tyler Warren, and that will be at least fun to watch for us draft nerds. But needless to say, you should be excited about Colston Loveland coming in here. He's a very talented tight end. Dealt with, I want to say, a shoulder injury in his final season, and the quarterback play was just awful at Michigan last year. But you go back to what he did in 2023 with J.J. McCarthy, like lots of expectations for him heading into last season, and still made enough plays to get himself into the first round last year. But really athletic dude, separation and really the ability to just make spectacular catches is what stands out to me the most with Colston Loveland. Like, I think he's a good route runner and has room to grow in that department as a young player. But at 6'6", his ability to high point the football, to box guys out on those dig routes, on corner routes, in the red zone. Again, Caleb Williams, just if he doesn't start trusting his receivers, you are not going to utilize the most of what Colston Loveland can do, because that to me is where he is at his best, is the ball skills and body control to make some of those catches. With the shoulder injury last year, I think he was a little bit more up and down with that stuff, but I've still seen enough high-end moments from him to believe that can be an elite trait for him at the next level. But yeah, I mean, just think Sam Laporta, very similar kind of athletic profile and role within this offense. They're targeting him for that reason, so there's plenty of reason to believe that can work out, given the impact we've seen Sam Laporta have in this Ben Johnson offense. So at the end of the day, I understand the pick and am excited to see what he can do to this group of weapons. Obviously, how good he can be in his rookie season for a tight end position that a lot of high first-round picks have not lived up to their expectations. How good he can be kind of starts to add up with, can Rome Odunze take a step? Can DJ Moore get back to his 2023 self? And you do start to see, like, okay, this Bears group of weapons is not going to be bad, but there is a bit of a wild card factor with this group with some question marks in terms of the upside they could reach here, because this could really be a top 4 or 5 group of weapons in the league if they hit some green lights with these guys. So we'll see what they can get from the rookie tight end there in Loveland. And those 3 are going to be your core assets for this passing game. Everybody else, in my opinion, at least for this season, is a specific role fit. But I do think Cole Kmet is probably the next player in this pecking order, even though I put Luther Burden up there on the graphic. Like I said, the Lions ran 12 personnel, the third most in the league last year, about 37%. So between that and rotating a little bit with Colston Loveland in his rookie season, you're probably expecting about 450, 500 snaps from Cole Kmet. I imagine that'll be pretty damn close to Luther Burden, if not a lot more, depending how much Lemedy Zaccheaus plays here. But yeah, Kmet is going to be their inline tight end, and probably, like, if they want to keep a tight end in to block and do the check and release kind of dump down possession tight end stuff, Kmet will probably take a few snaps from Colston Loveland, at least early in the year for that type of stuff. But I think this is one of the best parts of the Loveland pick is I've gone at it with Bears fans for multiple years now about how Cole Kmet is one of the more overrated players in the league. Bears fans have tried to defend him as a top 10 tight end and this kind of difference-making player. And I'm like, I don't know, man. He's a lot closer to, like, Austin Hooper, at least when Austin Hooper was good, than people realize. Like, he's a solid player. He's a good pair of hands. He wins tough catches. He's not as good of a blocker as you would hope he would be in that role. He provides a little bit after the catch, but he's not a separator. He's not really going to give you a whole lot beyond 10 yards down the field. And they want that at this position in this Ben Johnson offense. And Colston Loveland absolutely has the juice to do that and be more of a difference maker at this position. Cole Kmet, though, now becomes one of the better tight end twos in the league. So I like him a lot more in that role. And when this team does get into 12 personnel, he is going to be a legitimate factor in those types of looks. Enough so that, again, I think he's probably the fourth most targeted player here. And then let's talk about Luther Burden. He himself, you could argue, is a wild card, being an exciting young rookie coming in here. It's just, I really don't think he's going to be that much of a factor in this rookie season. So much so that I really do question if this was the right draft pick for the Bears. Not that I disagree with them in that Luther Burden was a value into the second round with the 38th, 39th pick or whatever it was, in that he was quote-unquote too good to pass up for the Bears. Like, best player available process drafting, I do agree. Like, Luther Burden was certainly one of, if not the best players available. I had a first to a second round grade on Luther Burden. I had him going in the first round in like all of my what I would do mock drafts. But I do think you have to reach a point of like asking what the skill set is and questioning other needs when you are talking about the 39th pick in the draft in what was kind of a generationally deep defensive line class. And to me, it's like the inverse of the meme of like, I want this thing, and then mom says, we have that thing at home. But usually the thing at home is like some off-brand crappy version of the thing that you want. This is like the inverse of that, where Ben Johnson came in and wanted the unproven, young, exciting piece that looked really explosive against college competition, when the thing at home was DJ Moore, who's a year removed from an elite season and is getting paid $29 million a year here. Literally, my high-end pro comp on Luther Burden was DJ Moore. So I'm not here to question the talent. I really like Luther Burden, but I like DJ Moore more. And yes, if Luther Burden just becomes another DJ Moore and you've now got like, you know, that in addition to the other three pieces we talked about, it is hard to argue with them taking him in the second round. But I do wonder if he's going to be able to reach that upside here, because it's going to be very difficult for him to get targets to kind of develop and emerge as that level of player, because I do think his skill set is very redundant with DJ Moore. And I don't think if you're Ben Johnson, you want to take away DJ Moore's targets to give them to Luther Burden. And on top of that, I think the biggest point here is the reason a player of Luther Burden's skills was there in the second round, by all accounts, is that this is a diva type of wide receiver. And that's fine. There are countless diva receivers in the NFL. Many of them are the best in the league. But it does sound like he's a guy that you have to keep invested, keep involved with the offense, is a guy that's going to either check out or be loud or frustrated if he's not getting his targets. That was like the number one most consistent knock you heard on Luther Burden and people a little bit, you know, closer to the Missouri circle. And eventually those reports started to kind of leak out and out and out. And that's where you saw Luther Burden's draft stock fall. That was obviously reflected by how the NFL viewed about him as well. Like, him falling to the second round was every bit a confirmation of all those reports. The fact that an NFL team didn't want to spend a first round pick on Luther Burden. So I have every reason to believe that that is his personality type, which again, I'm not banging on Luther Burden. I like Malik Neighbors had the same trait, and we saw what happened with him. You just got to keep him involved, but this might not be the right spot. And I do kind of wonder if this one kind of got away from the Bears a little bit from a drafting perspective. And it just doesn't really make sense to me as a fit. And for that reason, I just don't know if things are going to work out here with Luther Burden. And I really do wonder if they would have been better off, you know, we'll talk about this defensive line in a little bit, going after a Nick Scorton or Darius Alexander or something else on that defensive line. But obviously, I do think the talent is there for Luther Burden, and Ben Johnson does deserve some benefit of the doubt here, and maybe he can get all 4 or 5 of these pieces involved. But the last thing, too, that I didn't even mention is, like, last year, Caleb Williams struggled to get the ball into the hands of DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen. And it kind of overloaded Caleb Williams a little bit, too. So, like, I will continue going down this path for a second. Like, is that going to hurt Caleb Williams' development a little bit? If Caleb's trying to do his thing and Luther Burden's like, hey, Caleb, what the hell? Give me the ball. Like, I don't know, man. Well, it's very, very fascinating to me. Very, very fascinating. And I'm very curious to hear Bears fans' thoughts on what I just said and what you think about Luther Burden here. But we are now 6 deep into this group of weapons. We haven't even mentioned the starting running back there, DeAndre Swift, who's definitely going to be a part of the pecking order, if you will, here. He's never really fully broken through as a high-end receiving back, like I think his physical tools would indicate. Like, I always thought coming out of Georgia, that would be a huge part of who he was going to be at the next level, and he's been good at it. He's been productive because he is this human joystick. Like, that is kind of the point of DeAndre Swift, is the elusiveness out in space. So inevitably, you get him the ball on dump downs in the screen game, he's going to end up with his fair share of explosive plays, and you'll look back on the year and he'll have some good passing production. So he's a piece here for sure, but from a pass blocking perspective and some of the ball skills, even some of the route running, I don't think has developed as much as it could for him. He's a nice piece for sure. And for what it's worth, he had some of his better years production wise with Ben Johnson. 2021 and 2022 were his career highs in receiving yards. Yet at the same time, Ben Johnson did kind of run DeAndre Swift out of town to then draft Jahmyr Gibbs. So there's that. And Swift obviously is not Jahmyr Gibbs, but he will get used here. And then, just to rattle off the rest of the running backs there, Roschon and Travis Homer, I think will play because both those guys are much better pass protectors than DeAndre Swift. So depending on what they're looking for in their back out of the, in the receiving game, those guys could get on the field. You got Monangai, probably going to be more of an impact when we discuss the run game breakdown. But then some wide receiver depth. I mean, Olamide Zaccheaus, depending how Luther Burden's camp kind of goes, Zaccheaus could get in the mix. He is a high floor, useful slot gadget piece. Ideally, Luther Burden can kind of take that job and run with it, but Zaccheaus has been doing this for a while now, so he's going to scratch and claw for playing time. This is kind of the Khalif Raymond and early career Jameson Williams battle, if you will, where it took a while for Jameson to kind of fully take that role from the more established Khalif Raymond. So some parallels there. Tyler Scott can't really catch and has been a flop as a 4th-round pick, but for true designed deep shots, which we know Ben Johnson is about as good as anybody at scheming those guys wide ass open, Tyler Scott could be an eye to keep an eye on in a new opportunity here in a Ben Johnson offense, if he can just catch the ball in camp and earn those opportunities. Duvernay is probably more of a return man, and then I'd be pretty surprised if Samori Toure is anything other than a practice squatter there among 5 other names. And then, let's see, anybody else? Just the tight end depth that we didn't mention, Durham Smythe. He's a big target, strong pair of hands, but more of just a tight end 3 blocking specialist. And Steven Carlson will probably make the team as a special teamer. But there you go. There is your group of weapons. Obviously a really good, super deep group with all of the, different skill sets and physical tools in the world that you could look for. But definitely some unproven aspects of this team between the youth in Odunze, Loveland, and Burden, and then even DJ Moore kind of proving that 2023 was not kind of a bit of an outlier on his career. Not that he's ever been a bad player, but that was the one year where he was a true bona fide number 1 for sure. Needless to say, though, one way or another, this should be enough for Caleb. The question is, can this become an elite group that really helps this offense cook? But let's now go to this backfield and talk a little bit more about the run game here. So the Bears did make a minor addition this offseason to a backfield that I think Bears fans would say they hoped would have gotten a little bit more attention, but they did technically take advantage of the depth of this running back class and find a good prospect in Kyle Monangai in the 7th round, though I think you could argue earlier in the draft might have been better in terms of upside. Again, back to the Luther Burden pick, like, were there other guys like Cam Scatabo or Caleb Johnson that maybe would have made a little bit more sense with one of those mid-round picks? We'll see. But I do like Kyle Monangai. We'll talk about him here with this 30th ranked running back room in the league. Now, they do have some pieces. This isn't quite like the Dallas Cowboys, for example, where I'm like genuinely worried if they'll be able to run the ball with the players that they have. Like, they at least have some guys here that in a Ben Johnson offense should at least give them some bit of a floor in the run game. But, you got DeAndre Swift, who the last time Ben Johnson had DeAndre Swift, he traded him away and then spent a top 12 pick on another running back in his image, in Jahmyr Gibbs. And yeah, DeAndre Swift is just a very, very, very poor man's Jahmyr Gibbs. So for a coordinator that we know likes a thunder and lightning approach, DeAndre Swift can still provide some of the lightning, even though it's going to be very, very streaky when he's able to provide it, because DeAndre Swift might have the worst vision of any starting running back in the NFL. In fact, it's hard to argue for anybody else. Like maybe Travis Etienne, but I think I'm going DeAndre Swift there. He's just a very frustrating watch, man. Like, obviously the big plays are super exciting, and that's why it's so frustrating to know that almost every other play you watch him and he's either bouncing a perfectly well-blocked run outside and getting nothing out of it, or you just see him as kind of a hesitant runner where he's not able to tap into his acceleration all the time and press the hole and take advantage of good blocking. So I do think Ben Johnson got frustrated as the offensive coordinator of the Lions, watching as much DeAndre Swift tape as anybody, saying, I can't do this. I can't live with a running back that isn't taking advantage of the good scheming that I'm bringing to the table. So there's probably going to be some frustrations again there with DeAndre Swift, just as they had in Philadelphia when they had DeAndre Swift, and their reaction was, let's go give Saquon Barkley a bunch of money. Like, the writing is on the wall with what these run games have been before and after DeAndre Swift. So I think this is probably Swift's last year here. They're probably going to want a different player in this role in the future. And I think his workload comes down because of some of those frustrations with Ben Johnson, but also because of Ben Johnson's style. Like, DeAndre Swift got almost every carry in this backfield. He got 253 touches to, Roshan had 55. The next down was like Khalil Herbert had 16. So like just eyeballing it, DeAndre Swift got like 80% of the RB touches last year. That's not going to happen this year. So from a fantasy football perspective, I'm staying as far away from DeAndre Swift as I possibly can, unless that's the thing is like, if it's a best ball draft and it's the very last round and he's there, I would take him because he's probably still going to have some big weeks, but I don't think he goes in the last round of your best ball drafts. So I'm staying very far away from DeAndre Swift. But he does have relative usefulness in that Jahmyr Gibbs role, which was the original DeAndre Swift role. But we do know that Ben Johnson also wants that thunder to a DeAndre Swift's lightning, the David Montgomery role. And honestly, Bears fans should be very, very familiar with what that role is. They had David Montgomery, and they're very familiar with the Detroit Lions. So what I'm interested in here is, number one, is this a full-on competition between Roshan Johnson and Kyle Monangai? And Ben Johnson will kind of give 50% of the carries to whoever wins that job? Or is this just kind of a committee, hot hand approach with Monangai and Johnson kind of getting maybe 25% of the carries in that David Montgomery mold? That will be interesting to follow. I don't have an answer for you. I do think Monangai and Johnson are backs in that image. And then the other thing I'm interested in is, are either of these guys talented enough for the Bears to head into the 2026 offseason and say, yeah, we're good. We've got our David Montgomery at least. That I'm not so sure. Like, I like Monangai for what he is, but he was a 7th-round pick for a reason because he just doesn't have a lot of physical traits. He is quick on his feet. I will give him that for a big back, and I love his vision. I will give him a punter's chance to be one of these 7th-round draft picks that surprises and becomes maybe something like a Tyler Algier, for example. Roschon, on the other hand, I know the talent's in there. He's got, physical traits are not terribly different from David Montgomery. I think Montgomery's got better contact balance and lighter feet. But Roschon, let's face it, this is now 4 straight years of him not really carving out any major role within an offense. Totally fair at Texas. He was behind Bijan Robinson, but he still was not a lead back in college. Could have transferred elsewhere and sought those opportunities, and he didn't. I'm not holding that against him, but you go to the NFL, and it's not like he's been completely roadblocked, right? He could have edged out DeAndre Swift for more carries last year. He could have beat out the likes of Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert and come out of that 2023 season as a rookie and said, look, yeah, sure, I was a backup at Texas, but I'm a starting NFL caliber running back, and I was a steal in the 4th round. So it's starting to get to the point where it's like, I do believe in the talent. I still see some good runs on tape. I think he's got power and vision and everything you look for in the David Montgomery role, but it just hasn't happened yet. So, it's kind of a hand-in-hand conversation where I'm optimistic that Monangai and Johnson can be practical options in the David Montgomery role, but do I think they're super talented and definitely going to be the long-term pieces there? I'm probably betting against that, but it's possible. Like, I don't know necessarily where I land on that, but at the end of the day, it's just hard to get all that excited about this running back room, and I think they'll be able to run the ball okay because the rest of the pieces in the run game are pretty good. But yeah, I think you get the point. This is not the strength of the Bears team, is the backfield. And then just, one more shout out to Caleb Williams. They do at least get that boost in the run game with Caleb Williams. And I am excited to see what Ben Johnson has planned for QB keepers and read options and that kind of stuff that they just didn't really do with Jared Goff. But maybe they don't do any of that stuff. We'll see. But let's go to the final unit of the offense here with the offensive line, where they did see substantial changes to this roster. 5 players out the door, 3 of which were essentially full-time starters for them last year. Tevin Jenkins goes to Cleveland. He did miss some time, as he tends to do, and that's why they ultimately move on from him. But he played really, really well at guard for them last year. I do consider that a big loss. But the rest of them you're less concerned about. Coleman Shelton was their full-time starting center last year, but was very much replacement level. Matt Pryor, he was big. He was big and started almost every game for them last year. I'll give him that. Larry Borum, good backup tackle. Honestly, played 29% of their snaps. He heads out the door. And then Jake Curran was really hard to watch last year. He's probably a true addition by subtraction guy down there, getting about 23% of their snaps last year. But this was kind of one of the major stories of the whole offseason. A lot of people talking about the additions the Bears made on the offensive line. They go get Joe Thuney, all-pro guard from Kansas City, Drew Dahlman from Atlanta at center, Jonah Jackson, a starting guard from the Rams, and then they spent a 2nd-round pick on Ozzie Trapillo as well out of Boston College. So definitely upgraded on the offensive line. Ben Johnson came in and said, no, we are going to be much better along this offensive line than you guys were last year. And as far as the rankings go, as we head into the start of this season, I do have the Bears already as a top 10 offensive line. They rank 10th for overall offensive line and a balanced unit as well. B grades across the board here. And it's very aesthetically pleasing. They rank 8th to 10th in pass blocking and 8th to 10th in run blocking. Now, that's not to say every individual player on this offensive line is quote-unquote balanced. I would say the 3 interior pieces are all better in one phase than they are in another. But the unit at large all came together with very nice, stable, good rankings for me. And another nice thing about this unit is not just the balance, but I would say for the vast most part, you know what these guys are. I don't know that they have crazy upside to be much higher than we have them ranking here, but certainly the floor is really good with this group pending health. So at left tackle, you got Braxton Jones, who's been just a slam dunk 6th round pick, so much so that I'm a little interested why they're so eager to replace him with a 2nd round pick in Ozzie Trapillo, who I don't know has like crazy traits to be this like elite franchise left tackle. You know what I'm saying? Like Braxton Jones is very athletic. He's got the size. He loses due to a below average anchor at times, and sometimes he has glitches in his technique and has some losses. But for the most part, he's been a very good pass protecting left tackle. I like his run blocking tape. I think he's more athletic than Ozzie Trapillo in terms of getting on the move and having high-end impact blocks and taking out second-level defenders, and some of the get-off and ability to drive guys off the ball. Like, I think he's a good, balanced left tackle. Probably never going to be a quote-unquote superstar or elite guy, but someone that I would be willing to pay if I were the Chicago Bears. So I do find that interesting, and we can talk about Trapillo a little bit more after we get through the starting unit, but it does very much feel like this is going to be his last year here, and potentially them trying to replace him does ignite an even larger fire under his ass. I think he is clearly a motivated guy as a small school 5th, 6th round pick that's turned into the player he is. I'm not saying he needs motivation, but maybe this does have him put in those few extra reps and add some extra play strength in the weight room and turns into an even better player that you could argue the up arrow could even be pointing up on him. I don't know that that's necessary to put the up arrow on him. I think he's settled in as a very good player at left tackle. So you're very happy with that. And then Joe Thuney at left guard now. I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit on some of these other offensive line moves because I think it has been probably the most praised offseason move of any team in the NFL on a grand media scale is just the tremendous upgrades they made on this offensive line. I have some more questions about Drew Dalman and Jonah Jackson. Completely remove trading for Joe Thuney from those questions. That was a brilliant slam dunk move. You trade a 4th round pick for Joe Thuney at 32 years old every day of the week. Is there some risk attached to it, giving a contract to a 30, he'll turn 33 years old after this season? Generally speaking, yes. But to be fair, the Bears worked it out where he only signed a 2-year extension. So he's signed here through 34 years old. Thuney could have played more hardball there and asked for more years on that sucker. And good job by the Bears. Like all across the board, this is a really good move. And we've already talked about Joe Thuney in a few other deep dives as we've discussed who the best guard in the NFL is. And Joe Thuney is in that conversation because he is the best pass blocking guard in the NFL, which is very good news for Caleb Williams. And that's another reason, by the way, that Braxton Jones could play even better, to have a guy like Joe Thuney that can help communicate all those stunts and stuff and those pass offs. We talk a lot about centers being able to call that kind of stuff out, but ET stunts are the most common stunts, and those are typically going to attack the guard and the tackles. So that could alone, just from a communication standpoint, be a huge upgrade on the left side of the line, where that rotation of guards was a real big factor in their moments of bad pass protection last year. So again, I do not have a bad thing to say about going to get Joe Thuney. And even if he is 32 years old, when he's played guard, we haven't seen any sort of drop-off in his pass protection. He had to play tackle for the Chiefs last year, and he did what he could, but he definitely took his losses much more than he would at guard. And it's not like he's a bad run blocker either, but he's not the biggest, most athletic, most powerful guy, so he's just a good run blocker. But yeah, obviously this was an amazing move to go get a player that the Chiefs just kind of got. They wanted to keep Trey Smith. They couldn't keep Joe Thuney and Trey Smith. They decided to get younger there, even though Joe Thuney to this day is still a better player than Trey Smith. But then at center, you have Drew Dalman. And this is where I start to at least pump the brakes a little bit. I'm not here to be overly negative, but just because you make a center one of the highest paid centers in the league and give him $14 million a year doesn't mean he's necessarily worth that. And I'm not saying he's Dan Moore. I think he's a better player than Dan Moore, who the Titans gave $20 million. But the fact that everybody bangs on the Titans for paying Dan Moore and celebrates the Drew Dalman signing as if this was some glorified incredible steal, I'm just like, I mean, I don't know, man. Drew Dalman is not a good pass protector. Like, he's good at picking up stunts. Like, again, the ability to pick up stunts and communicate and have smart players in the offensive line, that's going to take a huge step. And I think Dahlman's going to bring that to the table. But he's undersized. I mean, he is every bit a young Garrett Bradbury, who, was a first-round pick by the Vikings. Excellent wide zone run blocker. I mean, Drew Dalman getting to play in that Falcons wide zone-based run scheme, he was as good of a wide zone run blocker as any center in the league last year. Now, the Lions are going to do a lot more other stuff. I don't know that he is an incredible full package run game player. Like, if you need to run pin and pull, can he hold down a nose tackle on that pivot point? Or if you're doing a combo block with him, is he going to create a ton of drive on duo? I would say he's not bad necessarily, but like certainly not a strength in his game. You think of him as a reach blocker, getting out on the move on wide zone, and they will run a lot of wide zone here. Don't get me wrong. He's going to be a huge upgrade and a huge asset to the run blocking there. But do I think he's even a better pass blocker than Coleman Shelton was? It's a push, in my opinion, and that kind of shows you where he is. So this between the scheme change and just, very baseline adequacy as a pass blocker, I do think this signing is getting overhyped a good bit, and we'll see if I'm wrong about that. But that is what I see in the player. But at the end of the day, like, I still don't think it was a bad signing. I generally do agree with teams when they have O-line problems, go throw money at the problem until you fix it. And to get better in the run blocking phase, that will help Caleb to have a better run game. And to just kind of maintain the same level of pass blocking that you got from Coleman Shelton, you could do worse. It is expensive, but you could do worse. But then at right guard, you have Jonah Jackson. And this is where I really would throw water on the fire. And I would actually say I would not have made this move if I'm the Bears. And I understand Ben Johnson has some familiarity with Jonah Jackson, and they wanted to just get it done in a trade so that they didn't have to mess around too much with free agency and just focus on getting one guy in Drew Dalman as opposed to needing two. So, like, I get it, but look, I think Jonah Jackson was going to get released by the Rams because they gave him way too much money. Kind of called him overrated a little bit coming out of Detroit when they let him go. And the Rams very quickly found out, like, yeah, we kind of messed up on that one. So I think Jonah Jackson was going to get released and probably get one of these kind of post-big contract, like 1 year, $3 million prove-it deals. That's the type of player he is. He's not a starting caliber pass blocker. He gets beat quite a lot. He misses with his hands. He blows assignments. He can lose to power. He's a good run blocker. That's why he got the money he got. But he to me has been insanely overrated by Lions fans being complete psychopaths in a good way and finding a way to vote him into the Pro Bowl. Whatever that 1 year he was where he made it, where he frankly didn't play at a Pro Bowl level. And since then, I think he's been kind of living off of that status. He's expensive, man. Not the 7th round pick that they threw at the Rams to bring him in here, but this contract is certainly not nothing. I mean, it always gets a little bit messy when you're acquiring a guy in terms of guarantees and where the money can go, but he's a $14.7 million cap hit this year. That number goes up to $17 million next year, and there's still $14 million of dead money attached to this deal through next season. So they're paying him like one of the top guards in the league for a guy that realistically, if they were good recruiters, could have let him get released by the Rams because they wanted nothing to do with this contract and bring him in for a 1 year prove-it deal for $3 million. So I definitely would push back on the hype of this acquisition. Again, he will help the run game. That is no doubt. And this run blocking was very poor last year. So I understand some of the excitement around him there. But if you're talking about, okay, are Drew Dalman and Jonah Jackson going to be an upgrade in pass protection? even from what they got last year in Coleman Shelton and Matt Pryor, I know it sounds crazy to say Jonah Jackson is on the same level as Matt Pryor, but he kind of is. In terms of pass blocking efficiency in the tape, like I just do want to pump the brakes a little bit on that acquisition. That was one where I was like, I don't know about that one. The other two, Dahlman, I can be sold on that one, and then Joe Tooney, I love that move. So they did make upgrades, obviously, but I have seen some Bears fans say like, oh, we have the best offensive line in the league now, or one of the best in the league. I'm like, it's very good. You made upgrades. It's still not perfect. Like, you're still going to deal with some pressure there from the center and the right guard, in my opinion. That's the weak spot on the offensive line. But fortunately, if your center and your right guard are your only real weak spots, you can double team with those guys quite a bit. But we can definitely keep this conversation positive as we move forward. You got Darnell Wright at right tackle, has continued to get better. One of the strongest offensive linemen in the league. Nasty, off-the-ball mentality. He's a very poor man's Penei Sewell for Ben Johnson. And maybe not even a very poor man's Penei Sewell, depending on what the year 3 development looks like. I mean, it's obviously high praise to even mention Penei Sewell's name on a Hall of Fame trajectory here. But the same idea. And any sort of special runs that Ben Johnson had in the playbook for Penei Sewell, you can kind of do the same thing with Darnell Wright, where he's a really nasty puller, deletes guys at the second level. He can drive guys off the ball at the line. And in pass protection, I would say poor man's Penei Sewell as well, where Penei is an elite of the elite run blocker and a very good pass blocker. I would say Darnell Wright is a stud run blocker and a good pass blocker. He does lose at times because he doesn't have the fastest feet, but he has been getting better in that phase as well, and you feel very, very cozy with him as your franchise right tackle. So there's your starting 5, and then you do have some depth. Ozzie Trapillo was a second-round pick, a very high-floor, mid-range tackle prospect. I think I had a third-round grade on him. They take him at the end of the second round, so no problem with that. Very balanced, taller tackle, but he's very aware that he's taller with shorter arms, and he's good and crafty to kind of work around it. He keeps his pads down and doesn't always let guys, get up inside his pads. And that's what you're worried about with a 6'7" tackle with shorter arms, is losing the leverage battle. And he's good with his hands in pass pro to work around it. And he's aggressive and keeps his pads down in the run game to work around it there as well. Not the most athletic guy. And even though he does work around that kind of awkward, tall build with shorter arms, there are times where he will let, longer armed pass rushers set the rules of engagement by getting their hands inside first. So I don't see him as this crazy upside tackle. That's why he was there in the second round. And he's going to have to prove that he's even a starting caliber guy before you're talking about replacing Braxton Jones. I think that's more of a problem for the 2026 Bears to figure out. But I would again beg the question with the Luther Burden pick and the Ozzie Trapillo pick, and we'll talk about Shamar Turner. I really do question if the Bears took those very valuable high-end assets with 3 second-round picks and did the best job at advancing this team towards what they're hoping will be Super Bowl potential. Are you really going to run into a spot where you can't just pay Braxton Jones, and then you could have used that pick on a potential superstar running back or a starting pass rusher? I know we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but it was just kind of an odd pick to me because I like these starting tackles. I do. I think they're perfectly good. And then the other thing is, like, there was just a lot of Ben Johnson coming in here and being like, this is what we're doing. They're giving up on Kieran Amagaji. And Kieran Amagaji did not play well last year, but he was a third-round pick coming out of Yale. Very new to high-level competition at playing football. To expect Kieran Amagaji to be good in his rookie season was never going to be realistic. So I still think he has a lot of potential here with a lot of traits. So I did put the up arrow on him just from a developmental standpoint. And then they did bring in Jordan McFadden. I liked him coming out of Clemson. I thought he was really crafty, although he doesn't really have the traits, but I think he could be a nice swingman for your offensive line with some guard tackle flexibility. The Chargers kind of gave up on him. but if nothing else, something to keep an eye on there. And then you do have a good swingman on the inside if anybody's going to miss some time. Ryan Bates, not a great starter, but as a backup, he's really good. He's got center guard flexibility, so I really like that. In a pinch, he can plug in and hopefully not be too much of a weak link. And then it's just a bunch of question marks. Doug Kramer, Luke Newman they drafted this year. Bill Murray's played a little bit. They bring in Ricky Stromberg. Just some interesting names to see what they can get there. Really just one deep on the interior, one deep at tackle, which is good. You like to think 7 deep, you're pretty insulated from injuries. So I don't mean to poo-poo the Dahlman Jackson signings. I just am pushing back on the hype a little bit. But it's still, again, a top 10 offensive line, a very balanced unit, and should be upgraded from what they had last year. But let's tie this offense together. So as we head into the 2025 season for an offense that is really all about a bunch of new pieces and a lot of young pieces and a rookie head coach in Ben Johnson, a year 2 quarterback in Caleb, that has a long runway to climb in our rankings here. This offense still ranks as the 19th overall offense, kind of at their floor. I think there's plenty of reason to believe, obviously, that they can exceed that. And pretty balanced. 20th in passing game, where I think there, especially, they have the upside to climb, with the quarterback ranking 26th. And the weapons, I think, having top 5, top 6 potential, as opposed to 10th to 13th, where I rank them right now. The run game, on the other hand, I think is probably more going to stay closer to where it is now with the 14th ranking. I just don't see the upside with the running back room. And kind of like we said, the rest of the pieces here with the run blocking and getting a little contribution from Caleb, hopefully in the design QB run game, and Ben Johnson being a very highly ranking run game designer out the gate here as a rookie head coach. That all sets the floor as this being kind of a middle of the road run game, ranking 14th there. I think someday you're hoping they can get more superstar running back talent like they had in Detroit to be one of the better run teams in the league. So 19th for overall offense. And then just a little side note for those following the series closely. When I put this video together, I did drop the weapons grade a little bit. They were originally 8th to 10th. Felt a little bit rich with some of the unproven aspects of that group of weapons. They felt much closer to the units that I ranked in that 10 to 13 range. So they did come down a little bit from where I ranked them in May, which was just enough to push the Cardinals passing game that ranked 20th in our last deep dive above the Bears here. So just one of those subtle tweaks and adjustments that I could foresee some comments coming saying, hey, what the hell? The Cardinals were 20th in passing game in your last episode. What are you doing? Well, there's your behind the scenes there. But let's hand the keys off to Dennis Allen here and discuss his defense. And we begin by taking a look at the offseason changes on the defensive line. And they did some stuff here, some free agent additions, most notably on the interior of the defensive line. They draft Grady Jarrett, and off the edge, they signed Dayo Odeyingbo from the Colts. Both kind of upper middle class level contracts. Basically like a 2-year, $26 million on Grady Jarrett with a team option in year 3. And then Dayo gets about $15 million a year for 3 years as well. So definitely throwing some money at the problem. And then they do spend a 2nd round pick on Shamar Turner as well out of Texas A&M. Not a ton of losses on the defensive line. DeMarcus Walker played off the edge. He was okay. He played 69% of their snaps last year. Nice. Darrell Taylor was actually kind of efficient. Did some nice stuff for them last year, but 35% of their snaps, not a huge loss. But then Jacob Martin as well was kind of a nice little rotational veteran for them. And by the way, they also reunite Dennis Allen with Tano Asoka Passignon. So I ended up saying slightly upgraded at both edge and interior D-line. You could argue the interior D-line is fully upgraded, is adding Grady Jarrett and Shamar Turner based on how I think about him, fully upgrading the unit. It's borderline. But let's go through this group. So they rank as my 20th to 21st overall defensive line. It's not a bad unit. They rank kind of right in that range for both pass rush and run defense. So at least in their trench play, they are balanced, right? So 18th to 22nd for pass rush. Not great, not bad. 15th to 21st for D-line run defense. Not great, not bad. So yeah, B- grades across the board there. So yeah, it's a solid unit, though. Not to beat the dead horse into a pulp here, but I do think they could have done more, especially with some of those day 2 picks to improve this defensive line. But let's get into it. So let's start off the edge with Montez Sweat. He is their number 1, and Sweat's kind of a hard guy to place. We're always trying to lump these guys into number 1s and number 2s. Sweat, I think, has been kind of like on the perimeter of like, are you happy with him as your best pass rusher, so to speak? I think on the low end, if everybody else was pretty good, you could be quote unquote happy with him as your number 1. He's either like the highest of number 2s or pretty low end number 1, but he's a very good player. They've been very happy that they traded for him because this unit before he got here was catastrophic. So he's a 55 to 65 pressure a season type of guy. He's going to get you anywhere from 8 to 12 sacks. Excellent power. He definitely can compress the pocket. And I will say this, excellent scheme fit for Dennis Allen. Matt Eberflus was a 4-2 style system like Dennis Allen will be, but the way Dennis Allen uses their edges to really, compress the pocket and just smash from the edge, Montez Sweat is like a dream fit for Dennis Allen. So you could even argue for the up arrow on Montez Sweat given the scheme fit. But he kind of sets the tone here and is a core reason why this isn't a bad defensive line, because the rest of this unit gets a little more shaky. But at least you got Montez Sweat. So they signed Dayo Odeyingbo from Indianapolis. He's not a $15 million a year player. And to be fair, that third year for Dayo as well, just like it is on Jarrett, is basically a team option. They can cut him after 2 years if this proves to not be the best use of what would be $19 million of cap space in that third season. But he is coming off a career year in Indianapolis, got over 40 pressures. He made an impact. He led Indianapolis in pressures because DeForest Buckner missed a lot of time. And he is that bigger bodied edge. And again, you could even argue for the up arrow because of the scheme fit with Dennis Allen. He's been able to compress the pocket as that big smasher on the edge, but he does have a nasty spin move, and most of his pass rush wins have come from the inside. So it'll be interesting to see, number 1, how he plays if he is more of a full-time edge in kind of the Cam Jordan role in this defense, or do they look at where he's had the most success and slide him inside a little bit more on pass rushing downs? Dennis Allen hasn't always done that with his bigger bodied edge guys, but it's, if he's not winning off the edge, where for the most part, again, he hasn't really won as a true edge rusher, they might have to, be smart about it and move him inside. So it's kind of difficult to know exactly what you might get from him. I do think the run defense should end up being better from him as more of an edge rush role instead of having to take on double teams as a 4-eye or a 3-tech like he has in Indianapolis. But the pass rush at the same time could go up because he's taken steps every year and gotten a little bit better, or it could actually be a little bit less efficient than what he gave them in Indianapolis in more of a specialized role. So for those looking at the graphic, he's got the green up arrow on his run defense, but the yellow arrow on his pass rushing grade. So an interesting player to kind of track how he does this year. And then your edge depth is just not very noteworthy. I mean, Austin Booker in year 2 will be fun to see where he can go. He was definitely a worthwhile day 3 dart throw on some pass rushing upside. Very young, very toolsy, not a ton of like true speed, but very quick and wins in a lot of different ways. He showed some flashes in his rookie season, so it'll be a good year 2 to kind of see what kind of step he can take. But Certainly not projecting him as a certified impact, as a nice number 3 off the bench or anything like that. You're hoping he can be. They did sign Tano Passignon, who's had some good years as a smashing 5-tech backup defensive end for Dennis Allen in New Orleans. He's getting up there in age, 31 years old, but should still be able to play that role just fine. Then you got some, dart throw types, Daniel Hardy, Dominique Robinson, some undrafted types behind that. Like, it's just not a very deep edge group. And it's almost like this was the deepest edge class that we've maybe ever seen in the draft this year. But anyway, that's your edge group. On the interior of the defensive line, you've got your 2 core starters in Javon Dexter, the youth, with the arrow pointing up, and then the wily veteran Grady Jarrett coming in at 32 years old over from Atlanta. So 2 guys kind of at a meeting of the roads heading in opposite directions here. Let's start with Javon Dexter, because I will be honest, getting through my 3 games of tape that I like to do for all of these teams for these deep dives, I walked away really impressed by Javon Dexter, much more than I expected. I knew he had a solid season just from kind of watching him on the broadcasts, knowing that his PFF grading profile, he had a high 60s grade, 39 pressures, 6 sacks. Like, I knew he took a nice step from year 1 to year 2. But I would argue the tape on him is much better than that grading profile would reflect. And I'm actually really excited for him in year 3. I think you really saw the traits. Like, he is a first round caliber player in terms of physical traits. He looks and moves like Chris Jones. The question for him was always, putting together the technique. And coming out of Florida, he had this brutal first step where you knew he was athletic because his 40-yard dash, he had a good 10-yard split. Yet you watch his tape and he was like super slow out of his stance. He's been much more comfortable getting out of his stance. He's winning with a bull rush. He's got a really nice club and go move where he can just displace you and then blow by you. And even his run defense tape, his pad level can come up a little bit as a taller guy, but I saw him really getting off of blocks and doing a good job in that phase too. So I've got him kind of pinned for a potential year 3 breakout here. And if that happens, if he can be, let's compare it to like the jump Milton Williams made for the Eagles. And that was his 4th season, but similar idea. Milton was a high 3rd round pick with a ton of traits that clearly figured things out. If that can happen, then this can be, that would just change the entire math and landscape of this defense if Javon Dexter can take that step up. So that's a big deal. And because of that, I do put the wild card icon on him, not because of potential downside, but because of what his upside could mean for the overall outcome of this defense. So I'm excited for him. At the same time, bringing in Grady Jarrett and expecting him to solve all of your DT2 issues is a lot to ask of a 32-year-old that was released by the team who was so desperate for D-line help that they traded their first-round pick in the upcoming draft to go get an extra first-round pick in the Atlanta Falcons. Like, if anybody needed D-line help, it was the Falcons, and they determined that it's time to move on from a franchise icon. So that's kind of where Grady Jarrett's at. I've been a huge fan of Grady Jarrett. You rewind 4 or 5 years ago, and I would have called him one of the underrated players in the entire league. He's a good two-way player, and I still think you can get solid to good play from him. But at 32 years old, it's just he's been regressing year by year, and counting on him to be your number 2 it's just a big ask for him at this stage in time. I would much more prefer him as a first guy off the bench on a great D-line that can kind of mix things up and do a little bit of everything for you. So, fine player, not a huge needle mover, in my opinion. It is at least worth mentioning that he last year was playing coming off a torn ACL. He did have plenty of time to recover for that ACL, but it's possible that he does actually play a little bit better. It's just hard to know, right? He has been regressing for age, but also maybe he's closer to his old self this year compared to last year. So we'll see what they can get from him. And then the rest of the interior D-line depth, you got Andrew Billings, who's never really been able to basically play a whole season because he's just constantly banged up, but he's a fun backup D tackle and a guy that can come in and play some nose tackle. Dennis Allen has messed around with kind of like those 4-3 odd fronts, which is where you would want an Andrew Billings as your nose tackle, because Dexter and Jarrett aren't great nose tackles. So you've got an option there, and Billings can come in and compress the pocket a little bit as a pass rusher too. So like just giving him 15 snaps a game, hoping to keep him healthy. He's a nice backup to have, but he is a constant risk of getting hurt. And then you have the second round pick in Shamar Turner, and this is where Bears fans will say, you're too hard on our draft, you're sleeping on a second round pick here that's really going to help us out. And I just don't see Shamar Turner as the guy that's going to step in this season and really help you. I saw a really raw defensive tackle prospect. Granted, one with a really nice first step and good strong hands with functional like tools to build around. And by the end of the season or by year 2, maybe he is a guy that, kind of develops under Grady Jarrett's wing and can become a nice number 2 defensive tackle next to Gervon Dexter, but he's a bit undersized. So defending the run it's just always going to be harder when you're lighter. He's a guy that moved inside from the edge, so he has limited experience playing on the interior of the defensive line. And as a pass rusher, it was just all trying to win with athleticism, quickness, crossing guys' face, and a bull rush that he showed his flashes. He was a young, raw flash player with good traits, not great traits, that I think was drafted about 30 spots too high, if not 15 spots too high. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on Turner. They take him at the end of the 2nd round, and to take him over guys that I think could have really stepped in and helped them right now, I'd be so much more excited about this unit and their potential for this season if they had a Darius Alexander out of Toledo, or even a Omar Norman Lott, who I wasn't quite as high on, but I still saw a potential impact pass rusher in year 1. And EJ made a great point in our interview as well. It's not like Dennis Allen, who clearly voiced his desires for who he liked in this draft. It's not like Dennis Allen has a good track record of drafting defensive linemen. Peyton Turner, kind of in this mold, was one of the biggest first-round busts in recent memory. I think everybody would agree trading 2 first-round picks for Carl Granderson was a mistake. And Isaiah Foskey was a top 40 pick that I bet most of you have not even really heard of because he didn't even play in New Orleans. So if there is an Achilles heel on Dennis Allen, it is selecting defensive linemen for his system. And I would kind of call my shot and be like, they messed up again with the Shamar Turner pick. But still, the arrow has to be pointing up on him because it has to. That was the point of him, was youth and projection. So there's some traits maybe he can surprise, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. Then it's, Chris Williams, who got into the mix as kind of an undrafted type, kind of a gap shooting guy, showed some splashes last year. Zach Pickens has been a complete bust for this team as a 3rd round pick. And then Jonathan Ford, who they picked up from Green Bay, is another kind of guy with some size. If Billings gets hurt, maybe you pluck Jonathan Ford up from the practice squad and have him do some space eating for you, because everybody else is pretty small between Turner, Williams, Pickens. But yeah, it's okay on the defensive line. That's really what I would say. And you got to keep these guys healthy too, because the depth is just not particularly good. And that will impact the rotation of things too. Your starters can't play every single snap, or they will get hurt, or they will get tired and play less efficient than their normal selves. So when these guys get into their second rotation or start moving some of these guys in, that's where you're going to really feel that this D-line is just, they're going to have a hard time making a huge impact on football games. And it's a bummer, because I think they had opportunities to, have us feeling better about this group at this time in the season. But let's go to the linebackers. This is a really nice group, a top 10 unit of linebackers. They rank 8th to 9th in Chicago for me for their overall linebacker grade, 5th to 8th in run defense, and a little bit lower in coverage, 9th to 14th, but a very balanced, very good duo here. One of the better linebacker duos in the league, certainly, with TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds.
where their names look very similar on paper. These guys literally could not be any opposite types of players, but it does combine for, again, a very good unit and a very fun unit. You have the undrafted, quote-unquote, unathletic, but brilliant, and not that Edmonds isn't physical, but TJ Edwards is a maniac, that type. And then you have Edmonds, who was the crazy athletic first-round pick that hasn't really reached his potential, but because of his physical traits is still a pretty solid, balanced player. But I do think TJ Edwards is clearly the better of the two linebackers, even if he might not have the more exciting highlight reel, though you could argue for it, because he doesn't have the sideline-to-sideline speed or the ability to detonate someone in the backfield. But he's always a step ahead of where someone like a Tremaine Edmonds would be in terms of run diagnostics, play recognition. He's so much better at play action, of locating the ball when it is handed off, but also knowing how offenses are trying to attack him off of play action. So it's actually kind of challenging to separate who's the better coverage player between Edwards and Edmonds, because obviously Edmonds can man up tight ends and have range in coverage. And if you're running a cover two, there's no doubt you want Edmonds to be the one that runs up the seam with the slot wide receiver, and he can actually take away stuff out in the open field. But Edwards has a much better feel for zone IQ and where the quarterback's trying to go with the ball. And that has led to Edwards actually having more ball production in coverage in his career. But you pair those two things together and you've got a little bit of both to work with. I do think from a run defense standpoint, it is quite clear that Edwards just has better play strength. While Edmonds is really big, he's not quite as good at getting off of blocks or delivering a firm, heady blow to finish tackles when he does arrive, having that stopping power as a tackler. But yeah, Edwards is kind of a brick shithouse, and he is tough as nails. So I'm a huge fan of Edwards. He continues to quietly be like a top 10 linebacker in the league. And then to just have kind of a athletic, run around, try to make plays type next to him, it works. If Edmonds had to be the number one and call all the shots and be your disciplined run defender, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But it's kind of like a diminished version, ironically, of when you had Roquan and Patrick Queen in Baltimore. Now, as far as depth, I should probably open up the Offseason Changes graphic. I apologize I didn't open up with this. Still getting used to the new format. But they did lose Jack Sanborn, who was a nice base defense linebacker, strong side linebacker for them. Not a huge loss, though. Only played 22% of their snaps, even if I like the player. But they've got their starters here, obviously. And then they did spend a 4th-round pick on Ruben Hippolyte. So I just left it as neutral for the offseason changes at linebacker. But it does leave some questions in terms of depth, with Ruben Hippolyte coming in as someone that basically anywhere you look was an overdraft. They're swinging for athletic traits, or maybe they saw something on tape that nobody else did, and they're just smarter than everybody. But this one was really out of nowhere. Any sort of consensus rankings, he was either not on them or not really evaluated or written up. So really only time will tell. It'll be fun to see his tape really for the first time, because I obviously didn't get to it. But then you've got Amen Agbogbemiga. He had some trades coming out. He's been hanging around for multiple years now, so he might be the first guy in off the bench. Noah Sewell would technically be your kind of, I guess Zach Bond role-ish, or Caden Ellis, where if you want kind of a heavy-handed on-ball third linebacker in this Dennis Allen system, maybe could do that. Like, he's good at getting off blocks and kind of setting a hard edge. So like maybe he would get in the mix there, but he doesn't really have the movement skills to be more of a starting linebacker. And then you got undrafted types after that. Power E. Coles, sick name coming out of North Carolina, but did have kind of 7th round undrafted tape. He goes undrafted. But yeah, not the best linebacker depth. You definitely need your starters to stay healthy, which hasn't been really a problem for these two guys throughout their career. But you go from a good linebacker room to now this secondary, which is so close to being like a bona fide top 10 secondary for me. There's just a couple of questions here, but this could easily be a top 10, if not top 5 secondary this year. But let's talk about their offseason changes here. really not a whole lot of movement. They don't really lose anybody, and they draft Zay Frazier out of UTSA in the 5th round. I said neutral there for the cornerback room, but Frazier's an interesting developmental pick. And then at safety, I did say hopefully upgraded because of Jaquan Brisker's return. He only played a quarter of their snaps last year. So I said hopefully upgraded. He does have some concussion concerns, though. So hopefully he can avoid that. But let's go through this group. You got your number 1 corner in Jalen Johnson. I've seen some Bears fans in the comments upset when I bring up like this kind of debate for who CB3 is in the NFL between Christian Gonzalez and Derek Stingley. Bears fans upset that I didn't throw Jalen Johnson's name in there. I'll give it to you, Bears fans. Like, Jalen Johnson has been awesome the last 2 years, and he absolutely could be in that debate for who the 3rd best corner in the league is currently. I think Gonzalez and Stingley are on a trajectory that makes you feel good about them kind of passing Jalen Johnson, because Johnson's not this sensational athlete, but talk about a guy that gets the absolute most out of, good athletic traits. He's not a bad athlete, but, he's one of the only corners that runs in the 4.5s that's like a true number 1 corners in the league. And that's because he's tough as nails. He's got great press man technique. He's super smart. His reactive twitch, his route squeeze out in space, if a receiver stops on a dig or a hitch, he is able to react to that and respond quicker with his body than even other corners that have more agility and change of direction ability. So there's just so much to like with Jalen Johnson. It's just occasionally he will get out athleted by the number 1 corners that he is asked to cover, but not too often. And he is, I would rank him probably 5th or 6th among NFL starting cornerbacks. So he's locked and loaded, and he's going to be just fine running a bunch of press man coverage. I think you can really do anything with Jalen Johnson. I think he's good in zone. I think he's good in man. Just love Jalen Johnson. How can you not? And then you've got your stud slot corner in Kyler Gordon. He will be a little bit more interesting to see. I'm not going to put the down arrow on him or anything like that, but I do view him as more of a zone corner for Eberflus's defense, whereas playing press man from the slot a little bit more. It's not that I don't think he can do it, but he's a little smaller. He doesn't have great speed to hang on some of the deeper developing routes that he's going to have to defend from that spot. And his zone IQ is what makes him so special, in my opinion. So, it's not like they'll never run zone. They're still going to be in zone coverage 65-70% of the time here. But playing a little bit more man coverage, could he see a little bit more losses in coverage? It's certainly possible. But you still love Kyler Gordon. And they just made him the highest paid slot corner in the league. So obviously Dennis Allen is not worried about it right now. Hence why I did not put the down arrow on Kyler Gordon. Just something interesting to keep an eye on. Reminds me just a little bit of when Desmond King, who 5 years ago was one of the premium slot corners in the league, went to Tennessee and was asked to play more man coverage. And you did see him go from one of the best slot corners in the league to average, I would say. But Gordon's got a little bit more quickness than someone like Desmond King. But the biggest question with this secondary is going to be that CB2 spot. I mean, this was a rotation at the end of last year. Tyreek Stevenson, a prospect I really liked coming out, certainly did not take that year 2 leap that you were hoping after a promising up and down rookie season. Obviously has the fail Mary debacle, but there was other points in the season where he was getting picked on, and they did kind of mess around with Terrell Smith a little bit. But I do get into this conversation not far from where we are right now in the video with EJ Snyder about this CB2 battle. So I don't want to, divulge everything we discussed there, but I do think Tyreek Stevenson, definitely more of a man fit for his skill set, for what he was coming out of Miami. I think he's learned some good stuff about zone coverage and has shown some good playmaking ability from zone as well. So I'm not ready to quit Tyreek Stevenson. He's just got to get his head on straight after, a tough year last year with the fans kind of going at him and all that stuff. It's,
the mentality of this position is really important. So if you lose your confidence and start questioning yourself, you start getting in your head about every loss that you have, because you will have losses at this position. You can fall by the wayside here. So he's not a guarantee to work out, but I do still believe in a lot of the traits that he has. He's got the size, speed, press man ability, and some of the playmaking skills as well. So I did put the up arrow on him, but he is a wild card for this secondary that they're going to need him to work out. They do have Terrell Smith. He's a nice player. I would be interested if he does win this job, if he really can just emerge as a day 3 draft pick that fell through the cracks. It does happen. I think he has a lot of size and speed to make it in the league. Never been too much of a playmaker. I saw a lot of him as a Gophers fan, but I think he's probably best off as a backup corner. Corners get hurt all the time, so to have him as depth is really nice. Whereas if he's starting, you're probably less optimistic about it, but maybe, I guess, is where we're at with Terrell Smith. He's a solid fourth piece to have. And then Zay Frazier, you don't want him playing right away. His tape is he just doesn't really know what he's looking at all the time. But he's kind of got that Reek Woolen vibe about him, coming out of the same school, 6'3", 4.3 something speed. Reek Woolen ran like a 4.29. Frazier was more like 4.37, but you do see the speed and the ball skills worth betting on. I would also be interested in Frazier if they ever wanted to mess around with him as like a free safety. I think there'd be some potential there as well. Kind of a why not 5th round dart throw to make. That a lot of Bears fans are going to get excited about, and surely for the Madden players out there, he is going to be a god amongst men for those picking the Bears in your franchise modes. But yeah, Josh Blackwell, solid depth, honestly, as a CB6. He's played a little bit here. You don't want him playing too much, but as a special teamer, an emergency corner, okay. Then you got 6 other guys in the building right now competing for a roster spot. But it's not just Tyreek Stevenson that's a question mark in this secondary. Both of these safeties, frankly, are question marks. Kevin Byard still played pretty well last year. Not great, but played pretty well. He played up to the contract that the Bears gave him. 2-year, $15 million contract to be a good, solid, reliable starting safety. Someone that at 32 years old has slowed down. I think you do still see the lack of impact plays, even some plays if there's a fast running back that gets the corner, or if he's trying to run a play down from the backside, he just doesn't have the closing speed that he once did. And that's why the Eagles let go of him, because things were really ugly at the end of that 2023 season for Byard. But he's still big, 215 pounds, really physical around the line of scrimmage. If they're able to keep him in more of a strong safety role, I think he can play at his best. Whereas having to ask him to play the post in a single high setup, not really what I would be asking Kevin Byard to do at this stage in his career. And it's going to be interesting with the scheme fit too. The Bears were able to kind of ask the minimum of him in a zone-heavy defense to just be, by definition, a safety and not have to do a ton of man-to-man stuff. Well, we're going to see a heavy uptick in man-to-man, and I don't know how well Kevin Byard can cover slot wide receivers man-to-man at his age. They're also, if they're running cover one, he's either going to be in man coverage or rotating single high a lot of the times too. So I don't know that I love him and his range at this point. So there's downsides to Kevin Byard, but he's still a nice player. But he is also a guy that's shown some pretty serious regression in his last 2 years, and sometimes you do see the wheel just completely falls off around this age. I think of Tayshaun Gibson with this Bears team, where he went from pretty damn good safety to unplayable overnight. There's a fear that maybe that will happen at some time for Kevin Byard on the last year of his deal here. Not necessarily projecting it, but it's got to be in the back of your mind. And then Jaquan Brisker as well has just as much risk attached to him. He's had to be kept off the field because of the concern around his concussions. And this is a position and a player, frankly, that loves to hit, loves to lay the lumber. And I think not only is he, putting himself at this position at an increased risk for concussions, but does it start to get in his head a little bit? Do you lose some of that physicality aspect on Jaquan Brisker, where he's trying to protect himself a little bit more? And does that hurt his overall play? Because I've never looked at Jaquan Brisker as this great coverage player. I think he's okay, just across the board. But, the point of Jaquan Brisker is the physical presence that he brings. And is he going to be able to do that when he knows he's a concussion away from retirement? It's a question mark. There's no way around it. I don't know how you could say it isn't. You can be optimistic about it here in August that he's going to be available for this team. But that wasn't the case last year, and we'll see. So it's really those questions at safety and CB3 that keep this secondary just outside of the top 10. They rank 11th to 14th. Like, this is still a very good secondary. Make no mistake about it. And then we should mention at least the safety depth. Elijah Hicks may be interesting if he does get more of a extended window to play here. Heading into a contract year, I think he's done some decent stuff as a day 3 pick out of Cal. Following in the shoes of Cam Bynum, maybe a little bit. So, I don't know, probably just more of a career backup type, but maybe he could do something. And then Jonathan Owens, kind of a journeyman veteran. Also there, it's adequate safety depth, nothing too exciting. Major Burns is one of the hilariously bad names for a defensive back in the NFL. See if he makes the team. But that rounds out this defense. So it's a very, very solid defense that I am excited to see Dennis Allen get to work with here. But I think for the most part, what this Bears defense is as a solid unit and probably isn't going to be a super disruptive game-changing force unless you get some of those big steps up from like Javon Dexter and Tyreek Stevenson. Everybody else, I feel like you kind of know what they are for the most part. But that certainly might not be the end of the world, especially if this offense can take the leaps that we're hoping they can. So again, 14th for overall defense on the Bears, smack dab in the middle of the league, 14th for run defense, and 16th for pass defense. And then let's take a look at the special teams, and then I'm going to roll the interview with EJ while we're making a couple format changes here. Out of respect to the time that our guests put in to come on to these deep dives, I'm going to do the schedule overview and team summary at the very end after the interview. But the special teams is very good here for Chicago as well. They ranked 10th coming out of my special teams formula. PFF had them as the 18th overall special teams, and then the DVOA team grade on them was 5th, so the metrics on them were very good. The kicker grade is 4th, with Cairo Santos has been a slam dunk find for them. Hopefully the days of the double doink are long in the rearview mirror. The punter, Torrey Taylor, was a 4th round pick last year, and this is why you don't draft specialists early. Maybe Torrey Taylor can prove to be a monster, but he was a pretty damn average punter in his rookie season after being applauded as like the best punter prospect of the decade. He certainly didn't hit the ground running. We'll see. And then they did add Devin Duvernay to the special teams as well. Nice little addition there. He is one of the better punt returners in the league. He's got some kick returning prowess as well, so I like that addition. It gets them ranking near the top of the league for return men. So you can see how the special teams is pretty dang good there. But yeah, let's bring in the wonderful EJ Snyder of the Bootleg Football Podcast. He also has a new Bears podcast, which you Bears fans watching, if you aren't following along, EJ, and that show, you're making a mistake. But a great guest every single year, EJ Snyder. EJ, my friend, welcome back to represent the Bears for this year's deep dive. Everybody out there, if you are not following EJ and Brett's work over at the Bootleg Football Podcast, I like to think of it as like steak and potatoes. I feel like we do have a lot of the same audience, but it's the way we do our series, I think, play off each other really, really well because we come at it from different angles. And I think for the NFL sickos out there, if you're not pairing these deep dives with what you guys got going on, you're missing out. But how you doing, buddy? Thank you for coming back for another year here.
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It must be working because what is this, year 4, I think?
I didn't add it up, but I think at least 4 for sure. Yeah. Always fun to get you back on here, though. But let's get into Bears, man. Let's start where everybody's head is at, I think, with Caleb Williams heading into year 2. It's, year 2 is always a big year for a quarterback. Year 1 was interesting for him. I would say roller coaster is probably the best word to describe it. I wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think were one of the two kind of biggest parts of his game on tape that could have led to some of those more uglier moments from him that you would really like to see him clean up and work on heading into year 2 so he can reach his unbelievably high upside?
Yeah, it's funny, and you have to look at the reasons for why the good plays happened, and like you said, why the bad plays happen. And I think the reasons for why the bad plays happen were fairly evident to everybody, and that's why we have regime change. The offensive line broke down left and right. Sometimes it was very good, but sometimes it wasn't. That inconsistency led to a lack of trust. The offensive play calling was an absolute shambles, and that led to a rookie quarterback trying to figure out what his place was in the world and do too much, certainly on occasion, hold the ball too long. But the picture that he was looking at was A, inconsistent, and B, generally terrible, as evidenced by the fact they went through 3 offensive coordinators last year. And I think for this year, he really just has to find comfort and trust, both in the offensive line. And we'll talk about that a little bit in terms of all the additions. I'm sure you're focusing on it in the deep dive. And in terms of coaching and scheme, having this be a professionally run NFL offense, which it has not been for a while now. And once he understands what those two things are, we'll really see what he has. And he does have a lot of gifts, but he's got to get comfortable with those two things before anything happens. And I think that's any quarterback.
Yeah. One thing that did stand out to me was just all the missed passes. I think I pulled up like the charting on it for overthrows and underthrows, and Caleb was charted with like 20% more than anybody else in the league. And a lot of that does come down to like the timing of the offense, a lot of the stuff you were talking about, being on the same page with his receivers. But was there any side of it that was like kind of, because for me watching his college tape, like that was one of the things was like, this dude just does not miss. The arm talent and the accuracy is just so good. Was there any part of you watching it as a Bears fan that was like, you didn't quite get what you thought you saw on tape or what was sold on him? Are there further concerns now that maybe the accuracy isn't quite what we thought it was?
I'm not worried about the accuracy, but in terms of worry, for sure, whenever you have a rookie quarterback come into a situation that is not conducive for growth, and I think it's very easy to say the Bears situation was not conducive for positive growth, you do worry because sometimes that ruins guys. Do I think it ruined him? No. Do I think it set him back? Absolutely. I mean, think of it this way. Like Jordan Love's going into his 5th season, and he's essentially had one play caller the entire time, Matt LaFleur. Caleb's going into his 2nd season, and he is on his 4th offensive play caller.
Did they have 3 last year?
They had 3 OCs last year.
What happened? Oh, because Thomas Brown got the interim, and then they had a different one. That's right. I totally forgot about that.
So
who was the third? Who was the third play caller after?
I don't even remember. I'm gonna have to go back and look. I tried to purge it from memory. But that's a terrible way to bring any rookie quarterback in. Being a rookie quarterback in the NFL is tough under the best circumstances, and these were the worst circumstances. So I'm not worried about his arm talent and his accuracy. I think that's still there. Did he have a lot of overthrows and underthrows and just stuff that didn't look good on tape last year? Yeah. And without being in the room, you don't know if he threw it to the place he was supposed to, or the receiver stopped or the receiver saw something different. It was a sight adjust and it didn't work, but it didn't work. And the bottom line is it looked very, very ugly.
Yeah.
I think once he gets settled, and there is a once he gets settled, because what Ben is asking him to do is very different than even what he did in college. We always talk about base defense. Well, his new base offense is play action under center. And that requires only footwork. He's now left foot forward to get into the play a little bit quicker. He's got to get under center footwork, turn his back to the defense, turn his eyes to the defense, turn back around, see where they've rotated to, because they will rotate. It's the modern NFL, and hit the right receiver. And that's a very different skill set than what he did for most of his quarterbacking career. So once he gets settled into that comfort with what he's going to be doing 80% of the time, then we're going to start to see those things come out. And that's what Ben said. Once he gets that, we're going to see all those gifts come to the surface. And I believe we will. The level to which they do, that's the big question is, okay, once everything gets settled, how much of it is there? How much of it works in the pros versus college? I think there's a lot there, but is there worry? Sure. Because the first year was so shaky for multiple reasons.
Yeah. It's like, okay, that happened.
Yep.
Let's now look forward. I think not just the timing too. Like I really did feel like there was times where he was just like kind of leading it out of bounds intentionally a little bit too, just like kind of playing it safe a little bit. So like getting that trust and having the offense be good, I think will help to rein those back in towards where it's getting charted as an accurate throw. All right. You want to talk a little NFL draft, EJ? Do you do that? Do you talk about the draft?
I don't know. Sometimes, occasionally,
sometimes,
a little bit. I've been known to dabble.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just kind of go down the board for the Bears. Wanted your thoughts on when Colston Loveland comes off the board with that 10th pick and how you felt about him as a prospect and landing here with the Bears.
Yeah, I think landing with the Bears was good. My wish for the Bears, as you know, expectations for draft season changed throughout the entire pre-draft process. By about 2 weeks out for the Bears, I just wanted the Bears not to come out of round one with a bad player. And I know that sounds so easy. Come on, you got the 10th pick overall. You got the pick of every player in college. You can do that, right? Well, turns out it's easier than you might think to misstep. And especially in this draft, top end talent was 4 or 5 deep. And after that, there was this wide middle of very evenly ranked players that went down to the late 20s or even the early 30s. And there were definitely some folks in there that I don't think will turn out to be good players. When the Bears selected Colston Loveland, given how this top 10 shook out and given what their needs were, I was pretty pleased. He's a good player. I do not think they will look back in 2 or 3 years and think, oh man, what a miss. I also think Ben took him for a reason. Ben has very specific plans for his role in this offense. And I can see that path, especially when I go back to 2 years ago, Colston Loveland tape, when he was playing with JJ. He looked like a very different player. They had their struggles at quarterback at Michigan last year. You didn't see as much out of Colston, but again, he didn't forget how to do all that stuff. And he was incredibly dynamic down the field. He has wide receiver skills in a tight end body. He can play inline. He can play in the slot. He's not the best inline blocker, but most tight ends aren't. He is a fine angle blocker. He is very strong and he gives good effort. I think he'll get better at that. But look, if you're playing Colston Loveland as a blocker, you're kind of doing it wrong anyways. So I really do think he's going to have a large role in this offense from early on. I think he's probably going to be the second most targeted player on the Bears offense, even as a rookie, because we forget that, rookie Sam Laporta saw 118 targets in Ben's offense. So I don't think it'll be quite that many, but I don't think it'll be that short. And he will see them from all over the field. He will be kind of, if you're using, again, sort of the Detroit equation, he's going to be some Sam Laporta, but he's also going to take some of the targets that Amon-Ra takes. And so we're going to see him run both of those routes, and he's capable of doing it. He is a mismatch because he's fluid enough that linebackers are going to have trouble with him. He's tall enough that safeties are going to have trouble with him. He's very good at the catch point, and he's fast enough that he can get down the field. And really, the Bears didn't have that kind of weapon, pass receiving weapon at tight end. So I thought it was a really good pick.
Yeah, and just kind of hearing you talk, I was thinking, like, watching Caleb's tape, it felt like a lot of the missed opportunities were on those in-breaking routes, whether it was Cole Kmet or whoever was in the slot. I feel like it's almost like sending an extra message to Caleb, putting a top 10 pick in here, making him kind of the focal point of offense. Like, hey, throw the dig. Yes, there's a corner or a safety like over the top of him. He's quote unquote covered, but he's going to cut. You're going to lead it out in front of him. He's going to box him out. He's going to make the catch. Those were the throws on tape where I was like, let it go, Caleb, let it go. He's going to get there. So hopefully they can really, like, that alone could really ramp up this offense. But let's skip forward now to round 2. They take Luther Burden. My take on this was this is becoming too many mouths to feed, actually. I think Ben Johnson is spectacular at this, but especially if you're taking a guy that is kind of falling into the second round because everybody says he's a diva. My pro comp on him, or at least his best case scenario, was DJ Moore. You have DJ Moore at home. The defensive line's still not looking great. That pick was, to me, like, yeah, maybe we need to tell Ben to relax a little bit. And we do have some guys here in Chicago that you can use in that role. What do you think about that? And what do you think about that pick?
I think you and I agreed with the timing of the selection and how high it was. Again, if you'd waited, you wouldn't have got Luther Burden. I think that's okay. That would have been okay with me. I'm going to give Ben the benefit of the doubt on this one. But yeah, there are a lot of targets. And as evidenced, I think Burden is probably at best the 5th player in the target list right now for the Bears, probably 6th. And on one hand, that's good. It's not great for where he was picked in terms of draft value up in the 30s, but it's nice that he doesn't have to develop. There's not pressure for a guy picked in the 30s to come in and be the guy. And there is on a lot of teams. He's got time to ease in. He's back on the field today. A lot of people worried about the soft tissue injury that he suffered in rookie minicamp. I'm not so worried about that. I think the good side is he doesn't have to be the guy right away. I think right now, probably his role is the spice in Ben Johnson's offense. When Ben's got a wrinkle to create something that the defense hasn't seen, and he wants to make a little bit of space and get some yards after catch, he'll use Luther Burden for that. Like he can actually
the
put
Khalif
together
Raymond / early Jameson Williams role, like that role. Yeah.
Yep. I would agree. And, some people will say, oh, that sounds cool. And then people will also look at, the 30 whatever pick and go, oh, it seems a little high for a spice guy. Yeah. And I'm with you. I probably would have, switched the emphasis there and picked the defensive line player that I liked better earlier.
Who was?
Again, well, there are multiples on the board. We'll talk about that because I know what your next question is.
You did. I do want to go rewind for just a second because you did say that Loveland's going to be the number 2 target here. So who do you think is number 1? Do you think it's DJ Moore or do you think it's Rome?
I think it's probably DJ in year 1.
Yeah.
Because DJ is very comfortable playing outside, but he is also comfortable in the slot and getting some of those, gadget targets that Ben likes to throw. DJ's got a bit of a running back skill set and build after he catches the ball. So he's versatile that way. And that just means the product of that versatility is that you don't really have to take him off the field. So at the end of the year, when you add them all up, he's probably going to have the most targets. I imagine Colston Loveland will be, I'd say Colston's probably around 90 targets. I said Laporta was 118. That probably means, given his catch rate, about 65 catches, probably 700-ish yards, maybe 5 TDs. I don't see him being a TD monster in the first year, but that would be a very good year, and it'll probably just get better from there. So I would say it would be DJ, Colston Loveland, Rome, probably pretty close behind that. And then, could be Zacchaeus, Kmet, Swift, anybody, any one of those could fit in there at the 4th or 5th spots. And then I think it's probably Burden. But again, your point of too many mouths to feed is just, you're going to have to move guys around to get targets. And as a rookie receiver, short of an injury, it's probably not going to be Burden right off.
Yeah. Hopefully he's cool with it and he's focused in, because that honestly, that to me, that's why he fell, because his tape to me was first round tape. But there's still one more offensive player to ask about before we get to a defensive player. I think they may have taken Turner before Trapillo. Those guys were like right next to each other, but let's just stick with the offense and then we can shift over. Just your kind of quick snapshot on Ozzie Trapillo as a prospect. And what I'm more interested in is, how do you see this playing out with Braxton Jones, who's heading into a contract year?
For sure. We'll start with the scouting report on Trapillo. He is big, and I mean real big, 6'8", tough scrapper of a tackle who will just fight you through every down. Better pass blocker than run blocker, but a good solid run blocker as well. Huge wingspan, strong hands, not necessarily the longest arms, but just because of his height, width of his back and his hands, he's very difficult to get around. 0 penalties in his final season at Boston College. Love that. Nice. If he's able to make the Bears feel like this is a dead heat between him and Braxton Jones, which would be a bit of a feat for a rookie tackle. I think Braxton Jones is a middle of the pack NFL left tackle, and that's hard to find. And if a rookie can make it kind of a toss up, I think you have to go with Trapillo, because he is lower cost and he has that ability to gel with this younger core, and you potentially don't have to break up the starting 5 next year. And that would be a first for the Bears in a very long time, to have any kind of continuity on the offensive line. And
starting 5 in Chicago, what is that?
I'm starting 11.
Starting 18?
Yeah. You've been watching Bears football, I can tell. No, and Braxton Jones is in a contract year, and we all saw the contracts laid out in free agency this year. $20 million for what I would call a very average starting tackle in the NFL. That means Braxton Jones is going to be in line for 23, 24 with increases next year. And if you have a 3rd round starting offensive tackle, that's a tremendous boon to your offense for multiple reasons. So if Ozzie makes it, Sure. Congratulations to Mr. Tom on his contract. Well deserved, by the way.
Yep.
But no, if Trapillo can make this a dead heat, I think it's a good thing for the Bears. And even if he can't, the Bears have not had a swing tackle of his caliber in at least 3 or 4 years. So that also would be a very good situation. Ben's talked about it multiple times. It's not your starting 5, it's your starting 8 or 9. And Trapillo is a strong piece of that. If he can win the starting job, cherry on top of the sundae.
All right. So now let's talk a little defense. My big takeaway from the draft was like, where's the defensive help here, man? Like, yeah, it's great. Like Ben Johnson's in here. He wants all his toys and stuff. But as a Packers fan going against the Bears, it's like you have no pass rush. And I don't think Grady Jarrett and Dio Odingbo are going to change that full-heartedly. So in what we said was one of the best D-line classes, if not the best in God knows how long, for them to come away with Shamar Turner in round 2. Do you think that's going to be enough for them? What do you think about that pick?
Was not my favorite pick. Said so on the draft live stream. Shamar Turner, I think, is a solid player, not one you take in round 2. And there were players on the board, again, that I thought would be of a greater impact to the Bears' particular defensive line. I also thought that if they were going to take Turner and slide him to the outside and be a 5 tech, and he played there the year before they went and got Nick Scorton at Texas A&M in the portal, and he actually had more flashes. And I thought, okay, maybe they're going to slim him down, play him as that big, heavy-handed 5 that Dennis Allen likes. Maybe that'll be the thing. Nope. They come right out and say, no, we're running him at defensive tackle. And I'm like, okay, you're going to have to prove it to me, because I didn't really see it on tape. He was solid, but not spectacular. He is a very tough player. He's good against the run. That's not what you draft in round 2. You draft a guy with pass rush upside. And I didn't see it from the interior defensive tackle positions where they've chosen to play him. So I'll wait and see. I'm going to give DA some credit, but DA has also had his misses. Dennis Allen has also had his misses picking players like this.
More than enough.
Right. Yeah. So that makes me nervous. He is now out as of today for 4 weeks as well, which is the worst possible timing for this particular rookie. So I'm going to go on and predict a very slow start to the season for him. Doesn't mean he's not going to be good over time, but there are multiple reasons for doubt. And that is, it's just really poor timing for an injury for a rookie that is trying to work his way into this rotation. And quite frankly, has a lot of pressure on him. All rookies have pressure on him, but if you get picked in the second round for a defense that needs pass rush help, that's even more pressure. And now it's going to be tougher for him to deliver on that promise.
Yeah, especially because like Darius Alexander goes like 5 picks later. It's like you could have had all those offensive players and then grabbed a 24-year-old dude that's ready to go that played in the Midwest. Like that was a celebration for me as a Packers fan on the live stream for sure, because I was like, great, offense will be fun, but this defense could be in trouble. So what is your 1 to 10 panic meter about the defensive line and how much they might hold this team back from reaching their goals this year?
Yeah, on the inside, and it's going to sound strange given what I said about Turner, but I'm not really counting on Turner on the inside. I don't think there's a problem on the inside. I think they have a good rotation of players, and I do think they have nice depth. So if you're talking about tackles, I'm fine with it. Outside, somebody's got to step up, or reasonably somebody's opposite Montez Sweat. And, is that Dio? Does Domrob finally excel in the new blitz scheme? Is it Austin Booker, Daniel Hardy? Somebody has to make enough flash plays as the opposite rush end in this defense. It is a blitz heavy scheme, but they've got to make defenses respect both edges of this defense evenly, and they're not going to right now. They're going to respect Montez Sweat because of what he's done and what he can do, and I think he's also a very good scheme fit for Dennis Allen. There's that.
Yes.
But somebody, and because, again, you need rotation. You can't have somebody in there for 700-800 snaps. You need a couple of the young guys to step up, make an impact on the other side so the defense doesn't always know which side it's coming from.
Yeah, for me, when Montez rotates out, I'm just calling vertical passes. Like I'm just keeping an eye on that, and it's like, all right, we're sliding our protection inside, and we're sending it deep. So what is the panic meter? You didn't give me the panic meter. 1 to 10.
Panic meter. I'm not going to call it panic, but I need to see somebody step up on the edge. Again, on the inside, I think they'll be good. I like the Grady Jarrett addition. Do I think it's going to, absolutely tip the meter? No. Is it a nice addition? It is. I like Dio. I think he's a good player. He is DA coded to, I mean, when he signed in free
Yes,
agency, it was like, of course he did.
of course it
I
did.
I like him as a player. I think he's a good, young, strong player that can hold up and be solid. But you
Mhm.
need more than solid. You need some pass rush flash from the other side. He'll provide some of that enough. I don't think so. So we're still looking for somebody else from all these young players to make a splash, whether it's in camp or the preseason or whatever it is. And so down the stretch, you've got guys that you can rotate in. It'd be great if, Daniel Hardy becomes like the fireball or pass rush specialist, right? The DPR guy that you bring in on 3rd and long, put him out in a wide 9 and send him,
Mhm.
go for it. Like, that's great. Right now, they don't have that guy, and they need
Yeah.
1 to 1.5 of them.
Or now that I've trash talked the D line, we'll just get Jervon Dexter will become Chris Jones this year and make me eat my words. Then
Could
you don't
be.
need anybody else. If you got Montez Sweat and Chris Jones, it'll be just fine.
Yeah, and Grady Jarrett cleaning up the leftovers, that's fine, which is, again, why I'm
Yeah.
not so worried about the interior, but on the edge,
Yeah.
do I have questions? Panic? No. Worry meter, maybe 6 out of 10. It's one of the weakest spots on this team, that other
Yeah.
edge
And
spot.
I imagine we're gonna see a lot of Dio as a part of the interior group too, like for 3rd down packages, don't you
Could
think?
be.
Or you think he's just true
Um,
edge?
Well, I think he's true 5. Like, Dennis likes
Yeah.
his 5, and he likes big guys that can stand up. When I said he was Dennis Allen coded, this is what I mean. Dennis Allen likes big frame guys who can control that edge and basically create pass rush by crushing the pocket, not necessarily speed or bend around the edge.
Mhm.
And that's what Dio is. So he's going to
Yeah.
play a lot of 5. And yes, occasionally on an NASCAR package, he'll rotate in and be the 3 tech. Maybe he's the pin on a loop stunt, something like that. We'll
Mhm.
see that. Is it going to be his main gig? No, I think his main gig is going to be that post that Dennis Allen always
Sure.
has in his defense that says, don't move because we're working things around you.
Yeah, totally. All right, one more roster question here, and then I'll ask you the final big question of the over/under for this team this year. But the outside corner 3 battle really is what it is between Stevenson and, well, I don't know if it's too much of a battle, but I think as the season goes on, Stevenson was pretty streaky last year. I guess what the question is here is, do you think Stevenson has kind of a big year 3 and kind of takes that job and becomes he's our guy moving forward, or do you like Terrell Smith to maybe get into the mix there as a starting option?
I think this is Stevenson all day long. And yes, he had his struggles mentally and otherwise. But when you talk about system and fit coming together with a player and a skill set, there's honestly no better match in the NFL than Dennis Allen's corner need and Tyreek Stevenson's skill set coming out as
Mhm.
a very handsy, aggressive, physical press man corner, which is why we loved him. Said, hey, he probably even has to tone it down a little bit. He's going to have to find
Yeah.
where that flag limit is. Dennis Allen loves those guys. And I think Stevenson is primed to be a star in this defense. Obviously, you've got Jalen Johnson. He plays very well. He plays better even in man than he does in zone. He is a
Mhm.
top, you name it, 5, 6, 7,
Yeah,
8
5,
corner
6.
in
Yeah.
this league right there. Has been forever, is incredibly solid. But you need a guy on the other side. And I think Stevenson is primed to be a star in this system. And people were ready to kick him out of town. And I understand the Fail Mary was a tremendously bad look. He, had further mental errors after that. But I'm like, give him a second. This is
Yeah.
the guy that just rolled into town, has the potential to elevate him to anything he can possibly be as a pro.
Mhm.
Smith is more of a linear guy. I actually think he's better in zone. He's got good size. He's got decent speed, but he is not great in terms of fluidity. And
Mhm.
so maybe he comes in dime. Maybe they work him in a little bit in the safety rotation as a 3rd or 4th safety, just a more generalist defensive back. But in terms of straight corners that Dennis Allen likes, I think this is Stevenson all day long.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I think because it did become late last season. It was actually they were rotating those 2 guys, right?
Yep.
I'm not
And again,
making that up.
more zone heavy scheme. And so a lot of people were like, oh, Terrell Smith looks pretty good.
Yeah,
Because again,
absolutely.
you're asking Tariq to do things that he doesn't do as well, and you're asking Terrell to do things he does better. So it looked much more even. I think in this scheme, there's going to be true separation, and Tyreek's going to be like, oh yeah. And if Smith has to come in because, Tyreek turns an ankle or something, or you're going to go, oh, okay. Yeah, we can't call 80% man with Terrell Smith in the game. That's not going to work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see it very similarly. All right, EJ, I'm asking every guest to go over under on the team's Vegas total. So I'm going to keep track of just the overall guest record at the end of the year. So it is 8.5 on the Chicago Bears. Where are you going?
I'm going over, but barely. I mean, by the skin of their teeth. I think 9, maybe 10 wins if everything gels early on the offensive side. And for me, the canary in the coal mine is going to be first quarter scoring. You heard it here first. You know how many points the Bears scored in the first quarter last year?
I do. Wasn't it 7?
It's 12.
12. But
12.
did they get their first touchdown against the Packers week 18 or something like that?
No, they scored 12 total points in the first quarter. It was really ugly, and that is too slow of a start. If we start to see the offense score points in the first quarter early on, over the first 5, maybe 6 games, this team could start to roll. I think the defense, it was good last year. I think it will continue to be good and hold up its end of the bargain. If you can start putting points on teams in the first quarter and make them chase a little bit early on in the season, I think this team could get to 9 or 10 wins. If they don't, if 5 or 6 games into the year, you're seeing those very slow starts, maybe a field goal, maybe nothing, it's going to be a struggle to get to those 9 or 10 wins, because as good as I think the offense can be after a while, I don't think they're in boat race mode quite yet. They're not going to be able to play a lot of catch up.
No, it's a great shout out. It's crazy what having 3 different coordinators will do for your 15 play scripted offense.
Two gestures at everything, like, just can ruin your whole team and get you a new coach, which turned out okay. So maybe I shouldn't be mad about it.
Or 2 new coaches, depending how you look at it.
Yep.
All right, EJ. Thank you so much. This was great. Everybody, again, go check out the Bootleg Football Podcast. Follow EJ on Twitter. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, happy to be back. It is an annual tradition at this point, and it's a lot of fun. Tons of respect for your series as well. I know how much work you put into it, and it shows.
Well, thank you. So thank you so much to EJ for coming back on to the Bears Deep Dive again this year. Let's now do the team summary on the Chicago Bears. So again, our 16th overall team, 19th on offense, 14th on defense, 10th on special teams. And I think that defense is probably going to stay around 14th, but that offense is really where the upside comes with this team. And as we look at these strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors for this team, it is kind of similar to the Cardinals from our last deep dive, where they don't have a ton of defining strengths. They don't have a ton of defining weaknesses, but they do have a good list of wild card pivotal factors that could get some of these pockets of this team into that strengths category. Right now, the only thing I can firmly say, no doubt, is a strength is the offensive coaching. But I was so close to putting weaponry along with the secondary in that strengths category. But that is where, in those wild cards, you've got all this young weaponry, just need to prove themselves a little bit more before I can firmly say that it's a standout high-end strength for this team. And then in the secondary with Tyreek Stevenson, as we just talked about, need to see him play better to not have kind of a weak link in that secondary. As long as they don't have a weak link, that secondary should be a strength with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon especially. One of the better CB1 plus slot corner duos in the league, if not the best. But likewise, just not a ton of weaknesses. I just put down running back as a weakness. And, running back, linebacker, those are the kind of 2 weaknesses that you can really live with and work around. As we saw, this team's overall run game was still ranked 14th in the league, despite having abysmal running backs here. But some of those other wildcard factors, obviously, Caleb Williams, the biggest of which. And then one more on that defense with Gervon Dexter. If he can take a big leap into year 3, become something closer to a 1B or a 2A caliber defensive lineman, you might be more in business with the pass rush, which would put more of a fear factor attached to this defense and maybe even be more of a top 10 unit on that side of the ball. But let's finish up with the Bears' schedule along with their Vegas odds, and if there's any value to be found in the market with their odds. It's a tough schedule, man. I mean, the NFC North alone, the Bears are our 4th-ranked team in this division, and we are inside the top half of our power rankings. So it will be an absolute gauntlet going through 6 games in this division, all playoff contenders. And then you also draw the NFC East, which has 3 at worst good teams, Dallas, Washington, and Philly. And then even the Giants, the Giants aren't going to be an easy out for anybody as long as that defensive line is healthy. But they do get the Giants at home. They should be favorites in that one. And then they have to play the AFC North. So you got to go through the gauntlet of Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. And the Steelers are never easy. They do get the Browns at home. So hopefully, Browns, Giants, they at least got the easier opponents from those divisions at home. But maybe the Bears would prefer to just go on the road and try to beat them on the road and get a team like Baltimore or Cincinnati or Philly or Washington in their own house in Soldier Field. So those are tough draws for sure. And then they also have a huge Week 17 road game at San Francisco. That's tough as well. So it's not an easy schedule, and I think that is reflected by their Vegas over-under. It is 8.5 wins, and betting the over on that pays like 180 right now on DraftKings. So nobody's taking this right now. Looking at this schedule, I guess I understand, but I definitely think they're capable of it. There's a lot to work with here. What is interesting is their Super Bowl odds are 30-1. It could just be crazy Bears fans piling onto that, but they are 14th to 15th at 31 odds to win the Super Bowl. I mean, if things do come together for this team, there is Super Bowl upside in there. I don't know if it's this season or next season. I mean, you have to get pretty much everything to go right and have perfect health if you're talking about this team winning a Super Bowl. But we know Caleb has tremendous upside. So if he reaches that, anything is possible for this Bears team. So I think that's reflected in the Super Bowl odds. And then, yeah, they are 4th in the division, plus 450. That sounds about right. If we played this division 100 times, they're saying the Bears would win it, about 16, 17 times? That probably sounds about right. I don't know. I think my favorite bet out of those 3 would be the over of 8.5 wins. The schedule is really tough, and the math I used for this formula said 7.2 wins on the Bears given that schedule. But as long as this team takes care of their own business and gets some things to go right with the development they need, I think this should be a pretty damn good football team that's kind of on that playoff bubble coming down to the wire with those last 3 games, Green Bay, San Francisco, and Detroit. How they play against those specific 3 teams could decide if they make the playoffs or not. But that is going to do it now for this Bears deep dive. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Let me know. Where do you think I went right? Where do you think I went wrong? Who do you think comes next in this deep dive series? Really appreciate you guys for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out. It really helps me out. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the number 15 spot. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the number 15 deep dive coming up within the week. And until then, peace out.